Good afternoon, everyone. We're gonna start checking people's audio and getting you moved over. Director Hoag, can we check your sound?
Hello.
Hello there. You are set. Yep.
Hey,
I can see you too. Excellent. Director Pereira.
Well, hello,
Hi.
smiling face.
You sound happy today too.
Yep.
Good. Director Nagy. Okay, we will come back to him. Stacy, check your sound.
Hi, everybody.
Good afternoon. And Eric.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. Joy, can we check your sound? Joy Young, can you unmute yourself on your end? Okay, we will come back to her as well. Matt, what about you?
Hello.
Hi there, we can hear you. Director Kale? Okay, Director Kale, can we check your microphone? All right, we'll come back to him as well. Joy, are you unmuted?
yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Director Nagy, I see your camera. Can we hear you?
Yes, I hope you can.
Yes, we can. Sounds good. Director Pedroso.
Hello.
Hi there. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Director McDaniel, can we check your mic?
I am here. It's nice seeing Mayor Nagy having an internet connection that works.
Very good. We can hear you. Let's go back to Director Kale. Might have stepped away from his computer.
I'm here.
Director Silvera, good to hear you.
I'm here.
Oh, excellent. We can hear you, Director Kale. Christine Chavez, can we check your mic?
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Emily Hayden, can we check your sound, please?
Hello, how are you?
Good afternoon. We can hear you. Excellent. Natalia, we'll get you moved over here in a minute. And let's go ahead and get Michelle unmuted as well, so, or moved over so she can give her report, because I know she's early in the agenda.
Mary Michael, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Nav, can we check your mic?
Good afternoon, Mayor Michael.
Good afternoon. We can hear you. Kyle, we'll get you moved over. I see you.
Oh,
Madam Chair, I know it's 3:01. Did you want to wait a couple more minutes to see if other directors join? Or did you want to go ahead and get started? I defer to you.
We can get started. Do we have, hopefully we have a quorum. So let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call this meeting to order of the MCAG Governing Board. It is now, my clock is always wrong, 3:01. And Joy, would you like to take roll, please?
Director Aguilar? Director Kale?
Here.
Director Espinoza? Director Faria? Director McDaniel?
Present.
Director Nagy?
Here.
Director Pereira?
present.
Director Pedroso?
Here.
Director Serrato?
Present.
Director Silvera?
Present.
Director Hoag?
Here.
And we do have a quorum.
Okay. Director Silvera, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I sure would, Madam Chair. If everybody would please rise and join me in the salute to our flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and
To
and
the
to the republic for which stands
one nation, under God,
God
indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
for all. Thank you. Okay. So we're moving on to item 2, which is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any directors who have any comments on the agenda that is before you? Seeing none, can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
By Nagy.
Seconded by Pereira.
Okay. And Joy, can we take a roll call?
Director Aguilar? Director Kale?
yes.
Director Espinoza? Director Faria?
Yes.
Director McDaniel?
McDaniel, aye.
Director Nagy?
Aye.
Director Pereira?
Aye.
Director Pedroso?
Aye.
Director Serrato?
Yes.
Director Silvera?
Aye.
Director Hoag?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, so we're moving on to item number 3 is public comment. Public comment is now open for anyone to speak on matters that are not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Stacy, if you would provide instructions, which are on the screen, of how to submit a public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To be recognized to speak, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. This can be found on your smartphone, tablet, or computer. If you're calling in from your phone and not using Zoom to view the meeting, please press *9 to alert the moderator of your desire to speak. Individuals who wish to speak will be recognized in the order they raise their hands and will be taken off mute by staff at the time. Comments submitted by email or voicemail in advance of the meeting will be read by staff after in-person comments are taken.
Okay, thank you. Mary Michael, do we have any public comments on the phone or email? Or do you have anyone who wishes to provide comment to the board today?
I did not receive any public comment in advance of the meeting on any item on the agenda, and I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Okay. Well, then we will move on to item number 4. Item number 4 is the Citizens Advisory Committee report, which will be provided by Michelle Symes. Is that how you
Symes.
say that?
Mhm.
Hey, thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my name is Michelle Symes and Michelle Symes Tiara. I am new to the Citizens Advisory Committee. I've only attended 3 meetings. Shane Smith and I actually started the same time. I know he presented last time to all of you. So I am in education, representing the educational side for the committee. I work at the Merced County Office of Education. So not a whole lot to report today from our meeting. It was extremely informational, as they all are to me right now. All items were approved. There is one item we did want to make note of, which is the One Voice legislative platform. We did vote to make sure that we added agricultural land preservation and to make sure that we distributed the San Joaquin Land and Water Strategy report to the board. From my understanding at the meeting, Jean mentioned that it was brought up last year and was asked to be put in last year and noticed the omission of it. And so we voted to make sure that the land preservation was noted in that. Again, all other items were extremely informational. Great to see so many new things happening with our transportation. I know Christine is going to update you on the microtransit pilot program. So it's great to see that we are really looking at ways to improve access for our county folks to get around easier and to have more opportunities. So she'll have a lot to share with you on that today. But other than that, there's not much more to report. So thank you for having me today. Unless there are any questions. Oh, Tom, you have a question for me?
I just wanted to say hello. Long time no see, Michelle.
I know, how you doing? It's good to see
Doing
you.
very, very well. We worked together here at Los Banos High School a couple of years back.
That was sad to say, it was about 22 years ago.
I was trying to massage that number. Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing the little conversation. And welcome. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We are moving then to the agenda for the Merced County Regional Waste Management Authority, which is item number 5. But there isn't any. It says there are none. So we're moving on to number 6, which is the consent calendar. Does any of the directors have any questions on the consent calendar?
Madam Chair, I want to acknowledge that I'm in here, so thank you.
Welcome. Are there any questions from the public on the consent calendar?
There are no hands raised.
Okay. If there are no questions, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Manual motions?
You're so quick with that.
Silvera, second.
All right. Joy, can we take a roll call? And Mr. Supervisor Espinosa is here.
Director Aguilar, Director Kale,
Yes.
Director Espinosa,
Yes.
Director Faria,
Yes.
Director McDaniel,
Aye.
Director Nagy,
Aye.
Director Pereira,
Yes.
Director Pedroso,
Aye.
Director Serrato,
Yes.
Director Silvera,
Aye.
Director Hoag.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, so moving on to item 7, this is an action item. These items will be presented one at a time by staff, and public comment will be available during the consideration of each item. So item 7A is presentation on the RWA action plan for HF and H and I. HF and H presentation. And I'll turn it over to Eric.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the board. Mary Michael, as I'm discussing, I failed to mention that Phil Manoffey will need permission to show his PowerPoint. Phil Manoffey, he's our consultant from HF&H. And before we get into Phil, as he's priming up, this item comes to you where staff is seeking direction. If you go to page 16 of your packet, you will see that staff has listed there the various laws that the state has enacted dating back to AB 939, which was passed in 1989. And for some of our newer board directors, what we wanted to do was make sure that you had a copy of the law that each of the jurisdictions are having to comply with, and we put the dates of when that law was enacted so that you would know that this is something that's been ongoing. And so as the staff report alludes to, back in 2019, we began the process to look at tackling one of those laws, which is Senate Bill 1383. And so Phil is going to share some slides with you all. And at the conclusion of that, staff is going to be seeking direction from you all on whether or not to go forward with the recommendation of the action plan for the authority. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Phil.
Thank you, Eric, for the introduction, and thank you, Madam Chair and the board for having me here today. Excuse me for 1 second, I'm gonna get my screen share going. And can everyone see it okay? Okay, great. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about SB 1383. I'm going to start with an overview of what it is, what it entails, what the requirements are, talk about the legislative timeline, and then we're going to talk about the process that we conducted over the last 2 years, how we did stakeholder engagement and how we came up with the plan. And then we're going to talk about the recommendations for the member agency, what they're responsible for, what the authority will be responsible for, and then we'll start looking at the infrastructure around you that could help facilitate potentially some of this, and then we'll finalize it with our recommendation. So firstly, Senate Bill 1383 was passed to target methane and hydrofluorocarbons. And what that means for us in the solid waste industry is reduction of methane from organics that are currently being landfilled. So in order to comply with 1383, it's not like prior legislation where jurisdictions could pick what programs they wanted to meet a minimum diversion percentage. Under 1383, there's strict programmatic requirements, and there's a little bit of optionality within that. But financially, a lot of those options don't make sense. So you're left with complying with a long list of programmatic requirements. The first one being organics collection and processing, the goal being getting organics out of the landfill. So you'll have to separately collect organics from your trash, and also you'll have to collect recyclables. If they were collected commingled, you would have to process all of that waste to remove the organics and hit diversion percentages. On top of making sure that all generators of organic waste are making sure that's diverted from landfill, you're also going to have to monitor and enforce to make sure that they are actually complying with legislation. In order to monitor and enforce their compliance, they're going to have to adopt ordinances and policies in order to codify and establish legal authority to enforce that. Additionally, it establishes a goal of 20% reduction of human edible food that's currently disposed by 2024. They want to get food out of the landfills that's currently edible, and they want to get it to feeding organizations to feed people who have food insecurity. On top of that, in order to ensure the success of these programs, there's stringent requirements on education and outreach. Additionally, best practices, you're going to want to include education and outreach because people won't understand how to participate in all these new programs that you'd be implementing. And because there's going to be all this organic waste going to processing facilities and generating recovered organic waste products such as natural gas and compost and mulch and even electricity, they're looking to jurisdictions to procure some of these goods because there currently is not a lot of people looking to buy compost and mulch right now in California. So you'll be closing the loop of that circular economy. And finally, there's extremely voluminous reporting requirements on an ongoing basis and an annual basis to the state to prove that you're in compliance. Now I want to jump into the timeline. Beginning January 1, 2022, that's when organics and recycling programs are supposed to be in place and enforceable regulations take effect. That meeting in January, CalRecycle can come out and they can come take a look at your programs. And if you're not complying and you don't have your mandatory ordinances and everything else in place, they can issue a corrective action plan. And that will, or they'll issue a notice of violation, and then you'll have 90 days to correct that. They will offer a corrective action plan for non-compliant jurisdictions due to extenuating circumstances and substantial effort. And I want to clarify what those are. Extenuating circumstances are narrowed down to acts of God, delays in obtaining discretionary permits for processing, or organic waste recycling infrastructure capacity deficiencies. Those are the only 3 extenuating circumstances that they include in the regulations and their guidance documents. And when they refer to substantial effort, that means that jurisdictions are doing everything within their ability to comply. It does not include things like failure to provide staff to implement the programs, or failure to provide funding, or failure to adopt ordinances. Those do not consider those as substantial effort, and therefore that would not make you eligible for a corrective action plan. Assuming you do qualify for a corrective action plan, that would allow up to 24 months to correct and address those deficiencies in compliance. Assuming that there is no organics infrastructure locally, you may have up to 36 months from the initial notice of violation to comply. And that allows time for permitting and construction of facilities that could handle this organic waste and divert it from landfill. And then on January 1, 2024, jurisdictions are required to take progressive enforcement actions against non-compliant generators. So that also will have a process of issuing notices of violations for people who are not diverting their organic waste, people who refuse to subscribe to programs. And after that notice of violation, there's follow-up. They have chances to correct, but there's prescriptive fines and enforcement upon these generators, businesses, and residents. So I want to quickly just go back down memory lane and talk about all the work that staff has done in conjunction with us and the member agencies. We started with the compliance gap analysis. We took the roughly 200-page regulatory text, and it's basically line by line items, everything you have to do. And we compared that to the member agencies and the authorities' current practices. We looked at things like franchise agreements, ordinances, purchasing policies, Cal Green policies, and we identified all of the gaps for each member agency as well as the authority. And then we met with all of the different member agencies. We talked through strategies and options that they could use to comply, evaluating what might work in their scenarios and what might not. And from that, we went and we did some due diligence. We looked at things like local capacity. What are some outlets, since there seems to be a shortage of organics capacity? We looked at what are the resource and rate requirements if you do different programs. What's the most efficient way to do it? If you implement a 4-container collection system, that obviously has a lot more capital expenses to run extra trucks versus a 3-container. So we did a lot of due diligence around that, and we called around and looked for all of the different service providers that we could possibly find that are listed on CalRecycle's facility list. From that, we came up with recommended solutions, and we worked with each of the member agencies and the authority again to just determine who was going to absorb what roles. And then we came up with our action plan, which I'm presenting here today, and it's roughly a 250-page document that I believe is attached to your staff report, or that's attached to the report. So in terms of member agencies, we have a brief list here. Each member agency does have its own action plan. There's a chapter for each of you within the larger document that explains your unique situations and what everyone has to do individually. Has things like timelines for implementing enforcement programs, negotiating with haulers, or issuing RFPs, has all the different programmatic steps and all the requirements individually. But from a high level, the first thing that every member agency should do is notify their councils and boards of the pending requirements. This is a huge change to the way we've done things, and you want to get in front and get the message out now. This is going to affect every resident and business almost within the county, so you want them to know about this and get the word out ahead of time. The next critical path item is amending or restating your franchise agreements, or issue a new RFP for solid waste collection companies. So that way you can comply with all the programmatic requirements. There's multiple member agencies don't have recycling services. Some don't have organics for all generators. So you want to clean that up and try to delegate as much of the responsibility of 1383 as you can to these third-party partners. That's going to minimize the financial and staffing impacts for each of the member agencies, which is why we recommend, use the contractors, these third parties, experts who are doing this. Additionally, since it requires ordinance updates, that's another critical path item. CalRecycle's indicated when they come and look for compliance beginning in 2022, the first thing they're going to be looking for are, do you have these ordinances that are prescribed? And do you have a franchise agreement in place that supports compliance? And then finally, there's a whole host of programs that'll have to be planned and implemented. Cal Green Waste Management Plan processes are important. Several of the member agencies have them, but they're looking for enforceable programs now. So things like self-certifying recycling percentage on construction projects is no longer going to be okay. People will have to submit weight tickets. Each member agency will have to receive them and make sure that they're complying with the legislation. There's also a model water efficient landscaping ordinance that will have to be implemented that has to do with using compost on large projects and water retention in soil. Additionally, each member agency will need to implement enforcement programs to make sure that the residents and businesses are complying. They'll have to assist in reporting and record keeping. With the authority will ultimately have the role that they have now in submitting to CalRecycle through their cloud-based system. But there's certainly lots of line items and lots of data points that the authority can't reasonably collect on their own. Things like notices of violations and fines that may be issued by code enforcement. The authority doesn't have access to those. Things like procurement records. The authority, again, is not purchasing on behalf of member agencies, so they won't have that information. Additionally, there's edible food recovery requirements. And the recommendation within the plan was for member agencies to attempt to achieve a regional approach. Currently, the county health inspectors are out there inspecting these food generating businesses. So in order to comply, it could be as simple as a couple line items on that checklist when they're doing inspections. Obviously, that comes down to an agreement between the county and the member agencies that would have to be worked out in the funding. And then finally, everyone, well, at the time when this was in draft legislative form, everyone had to adopt an environmentally preferable purchasing policy. CalRecycle has since come out and said that that's not required. When they finalize the regulatory package, actually within the last month or two, they've clarified it's not required. But in order to comply with all of the required preferable purchasing requirements, it would be not really feasible for everyone to comply if they didn't have a policy in place, especially in areas where you have disaggregated purchasing. If you don't have a policy, then your different departments likely might not comply. And as I had mentioned, everyone will receive their own individual action plans or should have already. And one other thing, I want to commend the authority. They had the foresight for bringing this forward and assisting all of the members. So there is budget for each of the member agencies as they go to council if they need assistance with messaging or presentations. We do have some remaining budget to assist you with walking through this process. Or if you have questions on any of the plans, then you're always welcome to reach out to ourselves or Eric, and we can get you the answers that you need. So now with all of that, what is the authority's role? And the first task for the authority is reporting and record keeping. And the authority is in a very good position for that. They already use a cloud-based system, Recyclist, which is going to have an efficient upload of all the data. There's multiple stakeholders, from haulers to processors to member agencies to code enforcement to city attorney. So having that cloud-based system is really going to minimize the game of telephone, and the passing of information will all be electronically uploaded into a central location. The biggest item for the authority is organic waste processing. Under 1383, the term organic is expanded. It's no longer just green waste as in the past at the composting site. Now it includes food waste. And this poses one of the biggest challenges for all of the state, and particularly the authority and the member agencies. There's not much, infrastructure surrounding you, and we'll dive into the lack of infrastructure. And because of that, we're recommending that the authority issue a design, build, operate, or direct staff to issue a design, build, operate agreement for an expanded composting facility at the Highway 59 landfill. On the subsequent slides, we'll talk about why that became our recommendation. And then the final piece is education and outreach. And if you're going to be building a composting facility, expanding your current one, and you're absorbing the feedstock, you have a vested interest in clean feedstock. Contamination is going to make it impossible to move the compost or lead to increased pre-processing costs. So education outreach could be simple things such as, adding signage at the landfill for self-haulers so they're not putting, contaminants in the organic stream, or it could be something that's handled through the operator of the facility through the DBO process. That could be assigned to them, so the authority is not actually absorbing any of the costs or the resource impacts of that. So now we're going to talk about why we're recommending a design, build, operate facility at the Highway 59 landfill. Right here is a graph or a chart to have organics processing solutions for food waste on the top, and the bottom is those jurisdictions without a current outlet for commingled food waste and green waste. And we really want to focus on the ones that do not have an outlet, the ones in the top, Bustine, Livingston, Los Banos, and zones 6 through 8 of Merced County. They have an outlet, so we don't need to build anything for them. It's the ones on the bottom that are going to have trouble finding an outlet, and why we're ultimately recommending a design, build, operate. And as you look at this bottom chart, you can see 3 of these 4 agencies utilize the Highway 59 landfill site. Dos Palos is the only one that's currently using Billy Wright, but they have a very small volume. They do about 5,000 tons a year in disposal. So assuming a good recovery number, you're looking at maybe 400 to 500 tons a year in organics, maybe up to 1,000 if they're doing a great job. So with that being said, it doesn't warrant building something at Billy Wright due to the huge capital investment to serve, a very small feedstock. It doesn't pencil out in any scenario that we've run, and we've worked with different technology vendors to try to get something to work. Instead, it's more economical if they use the Highway 59 site and they transport it a little bit further. It's simply much cheaper than building a multi-million-dollar facility for a small amount of feedstock. So in summary, there really is a lack of organics processing solution for the users of 59 plus Dos Palos. So why can't we just take this somewhere else, right? Why would we build something we don't have?
Phil?
Yep.
Sorry, this is Stacy. I was checking to make sure if your sound was funny to me or just anyone else, but your sound got a little wonky. I don't know if you changed anything on your end, or if you can like mute yourself and unmute yourself to see if it helped. You got kind of computerized.
What about now? Is that better? Or should I try?
No, it's the same. That was strange. It just started out of nowhere.
Should I try to dial in quick?
Like max headroom.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Max headroom, validating ourselves.
Yeah.
Let me switch to phone audio quickly. I apologize for the inconvenience.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, maybe if he logs out and logs back in too.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, if you cut your video, it'll clear up the bandwidth from your location.
Is this better at all?
No.
Okay. Yeah. 1 second, sorry.
That's okay. I'm sorry for the interruption, but I figured he's getting into the meat and potatoes of what this means for the authority. So I wanted to make sure everyone could hear him well.
Yes.
No, this is Eric. I appreciate that. Okay, I thought I heard it. I thought I heard Phil. Just to kind of go on what Phil was describing on this slide 8, the Billy Wright site, currently right now, Los Banos, is going to be entertaining a long-term agreement with Mid-Valley. They are the majority of the material that would go for organics and food waste to the Billy Wright site. And Phil, when you get on, just jump in.
Can you hear me now, Eric?
Yes.
Is this any better?
That's better. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, so before I cut out and got all wonky, what was the last thing that I was on? So like if I need to do any backtracking. Is there anything to recover, Stacy?
No. I think you were okay. It was just hit and miss. So I think you were just talking about how Dos Palos didn't have that they were taking their waste over to 59, and that there really wasn't enough for to justify, I can't remember, a facility.
Okay. Yeah, there wasn't enough tonnage to justify building something at Billy Wright due to all of the arrangements that we see up here in the top chart. So what we did from there was look at where else could we take this? And everyone who works in this industry knows there's a shortage of organics processing in California, but it becomes very glaring when you run a study. So we called around, we contacted 40 facilities through our subconsultant SCS engineers, and they identified 2.8 million tons worth of capacity. And of that, there's 17,500 tons that's available for food waste processing, which simply is not enough to support the volume of feedstock that's being generated by Merced City, Atwater, Dos Palos, and Livingston. So from there, we decided, what other options are there if there's nowhere to take this? And that became abundantly clear that the answer would be to build something at Highway 59. And the reason we're recommending design, build, operate is because that takes the financing and the capital investment out of your court and it moves it to the private industry. Also, they're experts in this. This is not just a landfill where we're burying trash. These are science experiments. You're balancing carbon and nitrogen and moisture and air to get a product, a soil amendment that farmers can use. And they're very picky about what they're willing to take. So we decided that it's probably best to have a competitive process where a vendor who is practiced in this and has a track record, a proven ability to do it, comes in and can design, build, and operate this facility. This will provide long-term rate stability that isn't necessarily present in a lot of private contracting operations or franchise agreements. It moves the processing, to your site, and you're contractually controlling it with the processor. So, in conclusion, our recommendation is you adopt the SB 1383 action plan that was provided to you and direct staff to issue design, build, operate for RFP for expanded organic waste processing at Highway 59. Regional approaches to organics processing and other limited functions such as the reporting are going to create economies and education, create economies of scale. Additionally, since there are no third-party outlets, you can wait and hopefully someone builds something, but then you're going to be competing with all of the other neighboring communities and counties that don't have an outlet. And again, it defers the capital investment and operating expense to a third party, so it keeps your budget nice and clean and doesn't inflate it unnecessarily. Another benefit is this introduces revenue stability at the authority sites, Highway 59 and Billy Wright, because all of this organic material that's currently being disposed is going to be removed from the landfill and put into an organics processing. So that's going to decline your tonnage at the sites and ultimately your revenue. And this is also going to leverage current programs. The authority is already reporting on behalf of the agencies. They're meeting with CalRecycle and supporting them through that process. So that's the most efficient way in order for this to be done in a central location, as opposed to every single member agency buying their own reporting software and tackling this individually. And finally, it provides member agencies with compliance planning and implementation support. Through adoption of this, then we can start going out with the member agencies and we can work with them on those plans to help them implement them and hopefully comply by 2022. And if not, at least ensure they're eligible for those corrected action plans so they're not being fined by the state. So with that, I'll take any questions or comments. And thank you for your time.
Okay, and as you all are thinking of those questions, again, staff is seeking direction from the board whether or not to follow the action or follow the recommendation made by HF&H, which, to be clear, is to do a procurement for a design, build, operate, finance, material recycling facility at Highway 59.
Director Silvera, you have your hand up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first off, Phil, thank you for, I did find in the actual staff report that we consider Dos Palace to be on the east side, and I'm glad that you made that correction for one. So I guess my question on this design, build, operate, when we talk about that, we're going to be losing tonnage that's going to be going into the RWA now, and that loss of tonnage equals loss of revenue. What is the scenario with this design, build, operate? You bring somebody in, are they basically come in and satisfy our 1383 goals, but then with all their risks, they get all the reward? Does that generate any revenue back to the RWA? Because ultimately, we have a plan that's built around certain amounts of revenue coming in, and we know that this new regulation is going to cause us to lose some of that revenue over the course of time. And how do we replace that revenue? So is this just strictly something where we're gracious that they want to come in and design it, operate it, and build it with no potential revenues back to the RWA? How does that work? Can you explain that a little more?
That's a great question, Mr. Silvera. Do you want to answer this, Eric?
No, go ahead, Phil, and I'll add too if I need to.
Okay, great question. And that's going to be up to the board. There's certainly different ways this could be handled, but the intent is for the authority to continue to receive revenue, and that could be handled through a revenue share agreement or a host fee. There's a couple mechanisms you could imply to get the revenue and retain that, but ultimately, a revenue share is ideal. Then you're not absorbing any of the costs, and you're just receiving a price per ton to help support the overall system.
Okay, and then the follow-up to that is this is all new to everybody. So is there anybody in the industry that's already doing it that a person can already kind of, at a 30,000 foot level, get an idea of a revenue sharing agreement? What does that look like?
Yes, there are some examples throughout the state of hosted facilities on landfills. In terms of building a composting facility for commingled organics and food waste, I'm not aware of any currently that were designed for 1383 purposes, but there are certainly design, build, operate agreements at several landfills for anything from organics to other maintenance facilities or things like that.
And then
there are proven vendors for this as well. We've been contacted by actually quite a few that are operating these facilities that are interested in helping the authority by building something on the site or locally.
And then when you look at the west side, having franchise agreements that are taking care of it, Los Banos being the one that's set to go here in June. Everybody else is in the middle of contracts. They're all kind of all over the place. What happens if any of those folks lose that ability? They lose that franchise agreement with that hauler?
Yeah, excellent question. So if we, right now we are planning steps and measures to get Billy Wright ready to receive food waste in the form of a transfer. And we haven't brought that to the board yet, but we are planning to do that. So we are going to bring that back to you all. And that opportunity, when we do bring it to you, is going to be for all of the authority. It's not going to be for any one jurisdiction. It's going to be for everyone, the public included, such that the material that's not taken on behalf of Los Banos with their contractor, we would either have some sort of transfer or another opportunity that would either bring that to Highway 59 to this facility that we would have and or go with the contractor that Los Banos has retained. We're looking at all options right now.
And to add to what Eric was saying, there's a very limited feedstock on the west side, aside from Los Banos. You have the west side of the county, but that accounts for about 15% of their overall tonnage. The east by the city is really the majority of their feedstock, which really leaves us with Houston, who has Jilton, and their contract is set to expire very shortly in a couple of weeks. But again, they have a small feedstock volume, so that could be absorbed through Billy Wright in Mid-Valley. They do have a little bit of capacity left over that could reasonably handle that. They just don't have enough capacity at their site to handle Merced City and those larger jurisdictions that have more feedstock.
Very good. And then I guess this is another question I kind of thought of is when we talk about the unincorporated areas where, like, I can speak for my parents, they live on a ranch and they have a dumpster. They don't have cans, they have a dumpster. What does that scenario look like for folks like that?
They would also have to comply, but there are some exceptions to the mandatory service for people who compost on site, or if they self-haul their own organics, but they'd have to have a separate container for the organics if they're not doing either of those. They're not self-hauling organics to a facility that processes it or composting it on site. But what we're finding typically is that people are being serviced with carts on the food waste and the organic side. It's rare that we're seeing, people take full bins, 3-yard big containers for food waste at their homes.
Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay, well, I just found the part for Dos Palace. I just want to just make a comment out there about the additional cost for doing this. We have a hard enough time getting our community to pay for the two bins that we have now. Now we're going to have 3 bins, and it's just going to be. Is it going to be a lot more costly to haul it to Highway 59 when most of our stuff goes to Billy Wright? I guess that's my question.
Well, currently the organic stream for Dos Palos is going to Jilton's facility. Sorry, I confused that with Gustine. No, so Dos Palos is going to Republic. No, it won't be significantly more expensive because it's a very short distance. You know, an extra 10, 15 miles each way is significantly cheaper than it would be to build a facility at Billy Wright, which is, you know, the cheapest solution we found was around $5 million. So for a feedstock of 500 tons a year, you know, a 15-year useful life, that's a, you know, several $1,000 tip fee. So you're better off paying, you know, a small increase on the transportation. And as I understand it now, the landfill fees are, you know, they're based on distance and everything like that. So the board would, you know, have to work through that and determine how to equitably support all of the different agencies.
Madam Chair, if I can, I'll just follow up on what Phil has said and state that staff is in the process right now of bringing back to the board the successful bidder of the tip fee study that the board had requested of us. And so that tip fee study will look at all streams. That's what we're proposing. The board has not approved. That will bring it to you all when they do. And so it will look at what are the costs for Dos Palos for food waste, for recyclables, and for trash, and propose options to you. And that is not just Dos Palos, that is every jurisdiction. So we do intend on bringing that back to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Chair McDaniel. Oh, why do I call you Chair? Sorry. Supervisor.
Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, maybe. Thank you, April. Hey, thank you for the presentation. I did have something. I know we have a large methane gas project where we're going to be generating from that. And this is to eliminate methane gas. And so I'm wondering at what point will this, you know, we're trying to sign an agreement with UC Merced and a long term. So at what point do we run out of methane gas? That's my first question.
Right. Phil, let me jump on this, and then if I've missed anything, please add to it. This Senate Bill 1383 is food waste. Right now, the authority has not brought in food waste and landfill. We don't have a permit to accept food waste. So this fourth material stream would be something that comes into that DBO, you know, however the proposers propose it. And I will tell you, we've had several firms get a hold of us. And they have, you know, there's a few out there that have said that they can commingle this and take all of it with other material streams or just one material stream, pre-process it or not. So there's a lot of different options. So when we put the RFP out, those proposals will come back to this board. But to answer your question, this material stream would be something that is required to be collected and diverted as of Senate Bill, you know, 1826, Senate Bill 1383, those bills that are in your page 16 of your staff report. And so it is something we don't receive now. And so therefore we wouldn't be losing it per se now. And in the landfill gas energy, the methane that we have produced today meets the requirements of methane that we needed to fulfill an agreement with the UC system. And so we feel confident that we've got enough gas now, and that's only going to rise the more in place trash that we receive, which would be outside of the scope of Senate Bill 1383.
Thanks, Eric. And the second thing I wanted to bring up, it was showing the plans for each city. And for the city of Atwater, I feel like it wasn't completed because there are 5 large grocery stores, 2 high schools, and a entire elementary school district, K through 8, that wasn't listed on that project. So I think in the cost, you know, through these projects, maybe we should look at that one a little closer.
Well, thank you for that. I'll take a look back at the City of Atwater's plan. There were a few member agencies that did not provide a significant portion of the information that we requested. And a lot of times those were things like business license lists and lists of all of the commercial businesses. So without those lists, we're left to, you know, finding them on our own, which is, you know, not an exact science, which typically the recommendations include re-verifying against your business license list.
Okay, thank you, Chair Hoag. That's all I have.
Okay, Director Nagy, do you have a question?
Yes, I had a couple. First, I'd like to say this was very, very thorough report that we got, and took me a while to get through it. I had a question on page 205. It's table 1, waste managed by Merced County Regional Waste Authority. I think it's calendar year 2018. And I had a question where Gustine was given a 77, whereas everyone else is in 10 times that. And I didn't know what that was in reference to. It says general refuse, but do we not have any other reportable refuse from the city of Gustine, or am I reading this wrong?
When it's received at the authority, it all comes in as from JILT and resource recovery. They do not allocate which comes from, the city of Gustine versus their other jurisdictions. So we reached out to them on multiple occasions to understand the breakdown between tonnage, and they were unable to provide that.
Okay, all right. And do you have an estimated cost to implement and manage this system? I know it says it's going to take like 0.7 of a full-time equivalent person, but it seems to me that everybody's going to have to buy more trucks and make more current rounds of picking things up to haul food waste. It even seems that some of it is food that's supposed to be consumed by homeless people or something. And how do we guarantee that that food is indeed edible? It just seems like there's a ton of money that cities and the county and everybody else is going to be putting out to keep up with this. Is there any state funding in this thing at all?
There's currently state funding for development of organics facilities and recycling facilities, and there's tax credits, but as far as I'm aware, there's not currently money available for just the rollout of programs. And we do have financial information about the costs of some of this, but we didn't want to compromise anyone's negotiating or procurement positions. If we come out and say it's going to cost you $1 million, and that's where your contractors are going to start.
Right.
So we have that, and we can work with staff. And if you have further questions, we're happy to, talk through that and what the best approach to minimize cost.
Then my other concern is that, I've heard of what the ratepayers are going to be hit with, and I have the concern of Chair Hogue that, we have a lot of people in Gustine as Dos Palos, and I'm sure all the other communities that are either low income, fixed income, or elderly that just can't withstand a 200% increase in their garbage bill on a month-to-month basis. And so that's why I'm asking, as far as what the cost, because the consumer is going to end up paying that cost because of the way that the cities and the government does things. So we need to make sure that our folks are, I think you alluded to it earlier, that, the communication to our people that, hey, this is coming. And if we could kind of broach the situation of, it's going to be an extra $100 on your garbage bill or $50 on your garbage bill, to let people know ahead of time that this thing's on the way. So it's not just all of a sudden the cities pass this ordinance that they're driving their garbage prices up. And because we're the ones that are going to have to sit in that meeting when we've got 100 irate consumers pounding on the dais wanting to know how come we're raising their rates. So anyway, that's my other question, was if there's the communication from the cities to the actual ratepayers and the county.
And I would add that through this process, our whole intent was, we acknowledge that there's going to be rate increases, but the goal was to minimize those as much as possible. And the rate increases are going to, in a lot of cases, be determined on whether the individual member agencies decide to negotiate with current contractors or go to a competitive procurement. We saw with Los Banos recently that the incumbent was, 3 or 4 in terms of bidding. So there was a lot of competition to get that and maintain low rates. In an environment where you're negotiating in a sole source, they're not quite as inclined usually to offer you the best deal. So those competitive environments would have a much lower rate increase than if you decide to negotiate in a typical situation. But I do agree you should be out, notifying residents that the state mandated this. We're not doing it by choice. Again, the state, and rate increases will be coming. We're looking at all the options. We've hired consultants through the authority to make sure that we can do the most we can to minimize your rates.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Director Silvera? Do you have a question?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Yeah, it's, so, we talk about increased rates. That has to go through a 218 process. What happens if it fails the 218 process?
That is a great question for your attorneys, and there are conflicting thoughts on that. We've seen that with the Paradise Water District, Paradise Irrigation versus the state of California, where they were claiming that they couldn't increase rates due to Prop 218. And currently they determined that that's not an excuse. But we could test those waters if you're willing to do that.
Well, I mean, it just stands to reason if people are pissed off enough, they're going to all sign the petition, and everything that I've known about a 218 process says that you will not raise the rates if a majority of the people sign the petition.
Yeah, so let me, if I can, I'll jump in here, Director Silvera. The city of San Diego is a good test case. They have what's called the People's Ordinance, and Senate Bill 1383, which is what we're discussing here with this, was passed in 2016 with final regs, in 2019-20, actually 2020, I believe. And the People's Ordinance required, it requires a 2/3 vote for anything to change that. And ultimately, they made the argument to the state that the People's Ordinance said that their residents would not pay for refuse and recycling rates, and so therefore they weren't going to pay for any rate increases devoted to Senate Bill 1383. Their attorneys took that forward and they lost that claim. That did not hold up. And so they are now looking at a multi-million-dollar, I think last I heard it was in the tens of millions of dollars of increases to buy equipment, trucks, staff, and what have you. And this is as of late. They've scaled that number down, but it started in the high tens of millions to the lower tens of millions. So I will say that I am very hopeful. I mean, everybody I talk to, I don't know any agency that is as far along as Merced County and the jurisdictions that you serve. This is something that everybody, I've been pulled into meetings based upon the work that HF&H has done for all of you, where people are they're asking questions that really HF&H has provided those answers directly to you all and to the jurisdictions. The other point I would make is that before we got to this point of bringing it to this board, we have had multiple meetings with the technical review boards. We've made sure that those action plans have been something that they have all seen. It's a lot of material, and so we've been open for any questions or meetings, and we are happy to have those Q&A with you all as well.
Well, thank you, Eric, for that. And that leads to my last, is just a comment that I really am appreciative that we're being forward thinking on this. There's a lot of work that went into this study. I can't say that I read every page of it because I found that it was a lot of the same information for each jurisdiction, but I went through the numbers, and it's probably, to Pat's point earlier, this is another state mandated, unfunded mandate that's going to really disproportionately affect the citizens in the valley even more, because we're talking about systems that have 1 or 2 cans that are now going to have to go to 3 cans, where all these, in San Francisco, they got like 4 little mini cans all in one. So it is frustrating, but thank you guys for getting out in front of it. And I really ask everybody to go through your individual section if you don't go through the whole report, because I noticed just in looking at the county, there's going to be additional requirements on the county when it comes to monitoring this. The food that's got to be taken from these, it's still good food apparently from like stores and restaurants and cafeterias, and then be having to take somewhere else, but these places got to be inspected. There's a lot of work that's got to be going to come out of this, and I do appreciate the approach of trying to figure out what is the best move moving forward. So thank you.
Okay, Director Perea.
Thank you, Chair. Does the methane, so the food waste, can it, if we could find a third party that was interested in it, just to buy it, and we could get it out of our cycle, Is that possible, or do we have to be in the middle of the whole process?
That's a great question. And we actually looked around at anyone who would be willing to buy this food waste. We conducted a survey. We looked on CalRecycle's website at every facility all the way up to San Francisco and Oakland, down through Kern County. And we contacted all of the ones that could accept food waste, and we asked them if they were willing to buy it or take it. And none of them had capacity to do so.
Okay.
Several have expressed interest in developing something locally, but if they're going to be developing it in your backyard, we assume that the authority might as well have control at their sites and also alleviate a lot of the permitting issues associated if you're already doing a fully permitted landfill versus trying to build it on a farm, or in someone's backyard. That would be a much longer process. So this would be the quickest and cheapest process. And also by doing it yourself, you're building the infrastructure, so that qualifies you for the corrective action plan. So rather than complying with the processes in January 1, 2022, your facility is not built. So that kicks the can a little bit down the road and gives you a couple more years. You can either gradually work up rates or communicate further with your constituents so they understand what's coming.
Sure. We have a methane to energy project happening already in Merced County, and so that's what got me thinking about this. And maybe we should look at tying into that company. The company's name is Maas Energy, MAAS. I don't know. Are you familiar with them?
I am not. And they're focused primarily on recovering methane from the landfills, correct? Which would be a different process from anaerobic digestion or composting.
No, their project is collecting methane off of cows and their excrement and turning it into energy. So, I think it kind of fits, and it's already being permitted through Merced County, and it didn't dawn on me until just here about a half hour ago when you started talking that may be a possibility.
And we would look for them to propose during the DBO process, but currently they don't have any permits to accept food waste or residential waste as far as we're aware. There's quite a few dairies and green waste composting facilities throughout the county, but they have agricultural composting permits, which don't allow you to bring waste from off-site. So that may be another scenario that we'll encounter.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay, are there any other questions from the board? Seeing none, are there any questions from the public?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have a question from Vicki Jones. Vicki, you are unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Vicki Jones. I'm the Environmental Health Division Director for Merced County. And so I did have a chance to review the report and would be happy to have discussions with anybody on the matter related to edible food recovery generator facilities, inspections, outreach, or anything like that, since I did see we were mentioned in the report. And I just did want to make a little bit of a correction that many of the tier 1 facilities are actually currently not on our inventory, such as wholesale facilities and distribution. Those are not currently part of our inventory, so there would be some extra effort because of that, but definitely happy to discuss that with anybody in the future on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Vicki, this is Eric Zetz. We will definitely reach out to you. Thank you so much for commenting to us, and we will make contact with you for sure.
Perfect.
Okay, Mary Michael, are there any other questions or emails?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. So with that, is there a motion to provide direction to staff on this item?
Is it an actionable item or is it just by recommendation?
It says there we need a motion. So yes, it's an action item.
It is, Madam Chair, if I could, this is Stacy. It is an action item, and what we're needing is direction from the board as to whether or not we should now pursue the recommendation that HFNH has made for the authority's approach to the 1383 compliance. So So what that would mean is it basically would tell us as staff to start to look at the DBO option as a way to move forward with developing a MRF at 59. So that's kind of big picture, but that's the recommendation that came out of the report. And so we'd be looking for a motion if that's the direction, or if the board wants to come back with any other additional information, we can do that as well. We're just kind of we're at the end of the road of what we worked with HF&H to produce. And now we need to know what the next step would be. And the recommendation is to explore the DBO.
Okay, Director McDaniel.
Yeah, if I could be clear, because I know that there were some entities within that document. So if we're making a suggestion or we're moving a motion at this time, we're not releasing HH to go on. They're still going to complete the document and some of the stuff that needed follow up. Is that correct?
If I may,
yes,
that is absolutely correct. There is budget there. So any of the assistance to the jurisdictions, we would use that budget for HF&H to help them present before their boards and councils these items. Separate from that, that's an ongoing, that's already been approved. So that's already there for them. But for today, we would, if the board gives us direction to come back and bring those proposals, if you give us direction to follow the recommendation by HF&H, we'll come back with, we'll put out a procurement, we'll come back with those proposals and say, here's the options, here are what they've proposed to us, here are those agreements, this is what, the finances look of this, how would you like to proceed? And at that time we could move on those or not move on those. But this is really to follow up with that DBO procurement.
thank you, Madam Chair. So we're looking for a motion of the recommendation at this time.
Yes.
I will move on that.
Okay.
This is Clara. I'll second.
Okay. So Joy, we need a roll call.
Director Aguilar, Director Kale,
Yes.
Director Espinoza,
Yes.
Director Faria,
Yes.
Director McDaniel,
Aye.
Director Nagy,
Aye.
Director Pereira,
Yes.
Director Pedroso,
Aye.
Director Serrato,
Yes.
Director Silvera,
Aye.
Director Hoag.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Item 7B is proposed agenda item for illegal dumping, and that is Stacy. Are we still doing that?
Yes, Madam Chair, this item is an item that I asked to have delayed from last month due to time. But this item, I would defer to both Directors Pedroso and or McDaniel. Per our agenda item request policy, anytime a director has an item that they would like to have on the agenda for discussion, that discussion needs to happen at the board. And then if there's any direction for staff to either do additional work or do anything related to that topic, that the majority of the board would need to support that direction. So this was something that came up earlier in the year to want to have a discussion with the board about what can be done around illegal dumping. So with that, I would turn to either Director McDaniel or Pedroso to lead that discussion.
Thank you, Stacy. I'll let Director Pedroso take this. This was his idea. And when he presented it to me, he did a good job. So I'll let him speak on this item.
Thank you. One of the big issues that we're having problems with are people illegally dumping their waste, and it's a lot of times it's because we don't have the spring cleanups anymore. And I think it's something that we really need to consider bringing back. And if there's ways to partner with the different landfill sites or the different bulky item drop-off sites in the community, I think would be really important and would be really helpful to alleviate some of this problem, because I know there's a lot of people in Merced County and in the unincorporated areas that are dealing with this. So that's what I had brought up earlier, and that's what I still believe. And I think we need to look at areas to make sure that we are kind of helping out this issue. And then I'll pass it back to my colleague, Supervisor McDaniel.
Thank you, Josh. And so our cleanups are being scheduled, and we are working here in the county itself, where we're actually paying for social media within each of these communities. We're what do you call it? Promoting it. So we're paying for advertising. So it goes directly to Facebook and stuff like that of those people to those communities. But it is a huge issue. And Supervisor Silvera actually was working on it as well for some of the illegal dumping, to where the county is now recognizing if we find receipts or names within the garbage that we find there, that we can actually create an action item that we can take and charge these folks for it. But I agree with Director Pedroso as well, that maybe we need to look at it. Is there an opportunity that we have to create, because a lot of our ranchers and farmers are getting inundated with stuff, and when it's in the roadway, or in our jurisdiction, the county will come and pick it up and take care of it. But sometimes they go back into the trees a few rows and they get stuck with this. And I just want to know, maybe if this board could work together and create an opportunity for the farmers, they're cleaning it up. And is there a way to help them out and they have to pay for it to dump it? Is there a way that we can work it out to help some of these folks out? Because let's be clear, a lot of this dumping isn't coming from county folks. This is coming from inside the city limits out into the county. And we just like to, if there's something we can do here at this board to help everybody out on this.
And I'll second what Darren had to say in regards to a lot of, like he said, a lot of these farmers, it's not, we see most of it on the side of the road, but what you don't see is what's happening inside of the orchards. And so they have to spend time. And I know people have, caught people doing illegal dumping, and they'll chase after them and stuff. And I tell them not to do that. That's not safe. So we have to figure out a way to dissuade these people from being able to do that. And so if there's something that we can do, and like Supervisor McDaniel said, we have to recognize the fact that a lot of these aren't just coming from the unincorporated areas. A lot of it is coming from the cities, and you'll see a lot of that. So it's just something that I'm interested in.
So I think what we're saying is we don't really have something we're here to propose. I think we're looking at maybe to Eric and to Stacy with some direction. Is there opportunities that we can propose? Is there directions we can move to help some of these folks out?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the conversation. And so generally, we are willing to have that conversation with any of our jurisdictions, and happy to receive materials in a coordinated fashion to assist in this effort. Now, obviously, everything that comes through the authority is a pass-through, and what you would have in jurisdictions is, if someone gets a call for this, there's a contact for the jurisdiction of wherever it's at, if it's the county or a city, and in that call, information for the date, the time, if they got a plate number, that is given to that jurisdiction contact. Then the jurisdiction or that jurisdiction would then have someone, whether that be their own collection crews, or if they've got a contract with someone to respond to illegally dumped items, then can work with us as far as bringing it to our facilities, and we'd be happy to have that conversation. We have in the interim, just on this conversation, the executive director has asked us to kind of put together, contacts and information so that we can identify resources very quickly when the calls do come in, so that we're able to point the public where they need to, or if we need to contact that jurisdiction for the public, we're happy to do that. But again, we're happy to be a part of the conversation and willing to do what we need to do to help in this respect.
And I'll just add, I know we have directors also with their hands up, but I think also for the sake of time, I think we could also, let us do some poking around on best practices of what we're seeing, maybe how other jurisdictions, other regions are addressing this issue. I mean, it really does fall in that crack between, the cities and the jurisdictions handling collections and us handling disposal. So when you have waste that needs to be disposed of, that doesn't have a place of origin to be able to charge for the disposal, to clean it up. But I think there's a couple of different ways. So that's something that if I will just propose in terms of because we'll need a consensus of the board to give us some direction, just to give us a starting off point for a discussion like this. We can maybe, poke around and see what we can find in terms of existing, out of the box ways that other regions might be addressing the illegal dumping issue.
Yeah, because part of the problem is, it's the farmer with his staff who pick it up. So he's already paying for his employees to do something else than what they normally do, and then having to take the time to take it out to the dump. And so it's an added expense. So we're not looking to do anything for free. It's just, how can we help them out? So I'm hoping we could further this discussion. If I could get my colleagues to join Director Pedroso and myself on this. I think it's something that's it's something we deal with. And I don't know, maybe it's because of his district and my district being closer to the population that we see it a lot in ours. We don't have a whole lot of rural area, but they take advantage of our rural area, and we get a lot of calls on it. I mean, I've driven out and worked with folks and picked up a lot of the trash myself. So,
and that's
it's not just a couple pieces of paper. It's couches, it's refrigerators, it's major dump.
Mattresses, tires, that type of stuff. So I would propose that, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so I would appreciate that staff, if the other directors were okay with it, for staff to go out and look at, some best practices that other people are doing and see if we can, kind of copycat some of what everybody else is doing as well. So
happy to do that and have that conversation.
All right, so we have a lot of people with hands up, so we're going to go with Director Espinosa first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, in City of Livingston, we have a bulk item pickup. Every residential has 2 times a year, besides having the county or the city having a annual fall cleanup and spring cleanup. That we just have to work together. I think with the cities, the county and the cities on advertising. So to remind the residents, because a lot of residents forget or don't know about it, and it's just more of advertising that, or just having a contract with each waste management or Jilton or whoever it's at in every city, just have it in their contract. You have 2 times a bulk item pickup a year, besides the remainder, MCAG pickup. So I think that's a good way to go. And I'm supportive of this with the rest of my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. So Director Nagy.
Thank you. I agree with just about everything's been said. Another thing that is happening is a lot of times that debris out on the roads is being set on fire, which is also a dangerous situation. One of the points I wanted to make was that, in the previous recycling discussion, the cities are going to be the long arm of the law, and there could be up to a $10,000 a day per violation fine. And maybe we need to up the fine for illegal dumping up into that realm also. The other thing I just wanted to, is kind of a lighthearted one. One of our farmers here outside of town posted a picture of some mattress and box springs and assorted other things that had been dumped on his property. So he went to go pick it up. This all happened this week. He went to go pick it up, and there was a tear in the mattress and there was a lump, and he pulled out a Playboy magazine that had $1,000 in it. So it kind of reimbursed him for having to pick up all the garbage. So.
Did he return the magazine to you, Pat?
No.
All right, so Director Silvera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I agree with what everybody said. And then when it comes to Eric, something I'd like to see is we had a massive dump out there on the west side where literally they had to drive over the trash they dumped like 4 or 5 times to dump it in this orchard. Somehow, some way we could figure out something in there that allows for.
Oh, you went mute. Scott, you put your mute on. Oh.
Sorry. They now have trash dumped in their field, their orchard, and then have to turn around and go pay to have it dumped. So somehow, some way, if we can, some kind of variance in there, and I get it. There's no one place to be able to track it from, but I think as a regional waste management authority, it needs to be an approach that we're all involved in, because it doesn't matter. We have unincorporated cities, we have incorporated cities. Sometimes it's folks that live in the unincorporated area. But then to what Pat said, take the lead from the county on this. We put an ordinance in place that now says that if we have 2 pieces of identifying information, we can go after and find these folks. If everybody's doing that, if the cities get on board along with the county, and now it becomes anywhere that they dump it, they're going to have to face the same types of consequences. I think that's going to be the approach to getting to a better place. If there is no fines in the cities, and they're going to, and we have it in the county, they're going to find places in the city to dump it. Your alleys are going to get filled up. So I think it's an everybody's approach. And then, so I'm completely in support of looking at something. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is, yes, last year, because of COVID, all of our cleanups were canceled. I think that those are back on track now, but it just highlighted the problem with having those canceled. We saw it all over the place. I know our public works folks have been out. I know how many times I've called them out. And like you guys said, this isn't just a one-off a mattress. It looks like they freaking dumped their whole house out there. So I think hopefully this gives staff enough kind of direction on to where we're all thinking here, and you guys can come back with some possible solutions. Thank you.
Okay, Director Serrato.
Thank you, Chair. Again, we're interested in working with you too at the city. This is an issue we deal with quite a bit. We've had a lot of policy initiatives, a lot of discussion on this as well. For our Public Works Department and their refuse response team to our bulky item drop-off site, which was, I think, up in 2018 or so. So that site. In addition to that, we're doing now every other month a community cleanup focused on certain areas of the city. The first few we've done have been, God, you're talking 15 tons of trash just in 2 hours we can pick up, hitting the alleys, hitting other spots. So I was actually out yesterday looking around for areas for our next one as well. So April 3rd is our next. If anybody wants to, get a feel for what we're doing and just ways I think we can partner as a county, because this is an issue that certainly affects all of us, are appreciated. So that's it.
Okay, Director Faria.
Thank you. Totally agree with everyone. Any support we can give from Los Banos, we will. I like that idea of an ordinance to be able to use identification to state people. So whatever we can do here on the west side, as Director Silvera well knows, we have a very large geographical area, and dumping it can be catastrophic at times. We just had a cleanup day on the 6th, and we couldn't even handle all the people. So we're probably going to be expanding the numbers of cleanup days we have with our new provider. So anything Los Banos can do to help, let me know, let our staff know, and we'll be right there. Thank you.
Okay, and lastly, Director Faria.
Okay, I'll make it quick. One of the complaints I get from the farmers in my district is that they don't mind picking it up, right? They've got equipment and trailers to do it. They just hate having to pay to go to the dump and pay to have somebody else's trash dumped. So I just wanted to throw that out there as you're coming back with ideas, if something along those lines of given somehow figure out a system to allow them to dump it for free. I know that's difficult, but that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, and so is this an action item as well, Stacy? That we need an action for direction? Is that what it is? Or just?
Yes, we just need to record the vote, and I'll just, if I could be forward on this one and just say that I'm taking the direction that we staff will take all this feedback, look into some best practices, and we'll in a couple of meetings here, we'll bring it back and present whatever it is we find and what are some of the mechanisms that seem to be working elsewhere.
Okay, so we just need a motion for direction for you to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I will make that motion.
Okay.
And do you have enough direction?
Yes, I think so.
I'll second
I'm
that.
sorry, who was the maker of the motion?
Pedroso.
Thank you.
Faria, second.
Okay, Joy, can we have a roll call, please?
Madam Chair, we do have public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Public comment.
Michelle, you can take yourself off mute.
Sorry, Michelle.
That's okay. So I just wanted to mention that my husband is a farmer and we farm on Kibbe, Bear Creek, Highway 140, Plainsburg, Childs Avenue. So we get dumped on a lot. And I completely agree with everything you're saying in regards to working together as a county. So my husband has been really paying attention to what's being dumped. And he's finding that it's very similar in size, very similar in items, and the way that it's being placed. So he has a concern that potentially there's somebody who is going out and promoting themselves as a person who will get rid of someone's dump and charging people and then going out and dumping it on our ranches. So I appreciate the thought that as a county, you work together and keep track so that if it is a person who is going around and dumping it and taking money and not going to the dump and then putting it on our farms, that we can keep somehow a tracking system that you mentioned. So I just wanted to emphasize that the tracking is probably going to be important as well. Thank you.
Interesting. Director Silvera?
Yeah, just to comment on that, Michelle, that's one of the things that part of that ordinance we've just passed here in the county. It talks about whoever's name we find, it doesn't matter if they hired somebody. Ultimately, they're responsible. We're going to hold them responsible. So if you hire somebody that's going to come and dump, $200 worth of trash for $50, if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. Well, you're responsible for it so long as we can find some identifying information. So I appreciate you saying that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a first and a second, and we just need to have a roll call.
We have another public comment.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Jose Moran, you may unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. This is Jose Moran from the city of Livingston, and today I'm here only as a stakeholder, a member of the community. I really like what you guys are doing, and I think this is a problem that I've seen throughout the community, especially when I travel, throughout Los Baños, Gastin, and Livingston. I'm seeing this a lot more often, and but just a little piece of information. I know this from a couple of years ago from another event when some trash was found on the side of the road, and it ended up being, after the investigation, the police was involved and stuff like that. And what ended up happening, somebody stole somebody's trash from their garbage can, and so it wasn't necessarily that somebody paid somebody else to get rid of it, but somebody was trying to steal information to apply for credit cards and stuff like that. So just a little piece of information for Stacy and Joy when they go out there and kind of look into that as well when they bring something back, and anything we can do to support it. And then also, I think that along with that, a plan for marketing and advertising all throughout the county, not only for 1 month, 2 months, but plan for a whole year or 2 years. That way, there's no reason or no excuse that people can say that they did not know about it. Thank you.
Okay, so before I go to Director Espinosa, Mary Michael, are there any other public comments?
I do not see any more hands raised.
Okay, so Director Espinosa.
Yeah, real quick, sorry. Yeah, just I think that we also need to include law enforcement, especially if we get a representative from all the law enforcement agencies in Merced County to work with our staff and listen to the concerns. But I think we need to express to them, because when people call and they say, well, if we found some receipts, obviously you can't prove it belongs to somebody, or right. So, but if the officers start tracking, where it came from, and if you see, one name or one address being constantly the same, so that can match it and keep a track. We need to track this so that way we can catch whoever it is. Thank you.
Okay. Do we need to have a roll call?
Yes.
Okay, let's go.
Thank you. Director Kale,
Yes.
Director Espinosa,
Yes.
Director Faria,
Yes.
Director McDaniel,
Aye.
Director Nagy,
Aye.
Director Pereira,
Yes.
Director Pedroso,
Aye.
Director Serrato,
Yes.
Director Silvera,
Aye.
Director Hoag.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, so number 8 is a discussion item. These items will be presented.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
It's you, Eric. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. And I apologize, Madam Chair, for cutting you off there. I'll be quick. I don't have any slides to present to you. I'm just going to let you know that we worked very hard. And as you all know, we've got the treated wood waste variance application for Highway 59. So the public can bring their treated wood waste to Highway 59 and we will receive it. There are manifest requirements for those hauling, over 1,000 pounds of that material. And then there's even more requirements for those hauling as much as 10,000 pounds. So do know that we will be requiring manifest much like a tire hauler if we get into those type of scenarios. Now, the law says that if you are hauling that type of weight, you then must have a hauling permit from DTSC for that. Now, as it relates to Billy Wright, we have applied for a variance application to allow us to transfer material that is received at that site. And we are hopeful that we will get that approval here very soon. And as soon as we do, I'm sure the executive director will get it out to notify all of you. As far as landfill gas to energy, I will just quickly say that we are working right now based upon the directions the board gave us at the last workshop. A few of the things that we are working on the power purchase agreement. This is the document that was referred to many times over in the workshop. And the license agreement. These documents we are going to send over to UC Merced actually today. And when that gets over to them, when they get done reviewing that, we will then bring it back to the board for approval. We also plan to hold a public hearing to give the public an opportunity to voice any concerns they may have to the project. We'll need to adopt the mitigated negative declaration, the initial study. So the environmental document will come back to this board for approval. And then of course, the contract with MozTech, we will be looking at forms to bring that to you. There's a very real possibility for timing. It takes some time to order some of the pieces of this leg of the equipment. The project's not approved yet. So we would bring a limited contract to you if we needed to move any sooner on anything, and we would bring that to you if we had that discussion. So any questions or anything like that throughout any of this process, please reach out to me. And then finally, I would refer to you on the staff report. We did have a list of the remaining community cleanups mattresses, those are received freely at our authority. And so you have a list of the cleanups that are going forward. So just wanted to point you to that. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, do you have any questions for Eric? Are there any public comments?
I see Director Nagy's hand raised.
I see it now too. Director Nagy.
Yes, thank you. Eric, I just had one question in reading the staff report. It said that we got the variance just like right after we paid them for it. And I was just wondering how much it cost us to get that variance.
I can tell you that right now. Yeah, and so the fee for the variance was devoted to the processing of the application. So for Highway 59, we paid $1,870.12.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Any public comments?
There are no hands raised.
And this was just informational only. So let's move on to moving to Merced County Association of Government agenda, which is item number 9, is for information items only. Do any of the directors have any questions for staff on these items? Do I read all through these? Do I have to read through? I don't have to read through them. Okay.
No.
Anybody have any questions on any of these items? How about public comment?
I do not see any hands raised.
I don't want to forget that now. Okay, so then we are going to move to item number 10 is the consent calendar, unless any of the directors would like to pull an item for separate consideration or action. These items can be acted upon in one motion. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, I see. Director Silvera has a question.
Madam Chair, I don't have a question. I just would like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
How about anybody else?
Second by Nagy.
Okay. Joy, do you want to call for the roll call?
Yes, thank you. Director Kale,
Yes.
Director Espinoza,
Yes.
Director Faria,
Yes.
Director McDaniel,
Aye.
Director Nagy,
Aye.
Director Pereira,
Yes.
Director Pedroso,
Aye.
Director Serrato,
Yes.
Director Silvera,
Aye.
Director Hogue.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. So now we're going to move to item 11, which is an action item. We have 2. So item 11A is a request to adopt the 2021 One Voice Legislature platform. And this is Mary Michaels.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This action item before you today is the adoption of the 2021 One Voice platform that was assembled by the One Voice delegation. The members of the delegation are listed in the first attachment to the staff report on page 288 and include several members of your board as well. As you can see in the platform, the policy priorities span several categories, many of which are similar to those that we have utilized in the past, and include transportation, economic development, public safety, homelessness and housing, recreational facilities, utility infrastructure, and a policy on the disbursement of federal funds directly to local jurisdictions. This platform is supported by the Technical Review Board, and the CAC voted to adopt it earlier this month as well, with the addition, as was mentioned by Michelle earlier, of a policy regarding the preservation of agricultural land for food production purposes. Upon adoption of the platform, this document will be foundational to the virtual trip that will be conducted by the delegation on behalf of the region when we meet with the federal policymakers in early May, as well as the advocacy work we do throughout the year. In addition to the platform, you'll find several fact sheets submitted by the jurisdictions in support of the policies included in the platform. These will be used for more information supporting the policies within the platform. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I see that Director McDaniel has his hand up.
Thank you. I understand their consideration with ag land preservation, and I appreciate that. But I also don't see how this is a discussion in Washington, D.C. This is about local control, property rights, and I am more about local control. And I don't think the federal government, I don't see where we have this discussion with the federal government. So I don't think it needs to be included. Nothing more embarrassing than talking to a federal government person and they say, that's something local. Why are you bringing this to us? So at this time, I think it's not the right opportunity to have it in our platform.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions for the board? Are there any questions for the public?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, then is there a motion?
Also move without that addition.
Okay.
Pedroso, second.
Okay. Joy, do you want to call for the roll?
Yes, Director Kale. I'm sorry, Director Kale?
Yes.
Director Espinoza?
Yes.
Director Faria?
Yes.
Director McDaniel?
Aye.
Director Nagy?
Aye.
Director Pereira?
Yes.
Director Pedroso?
Aye.
Director Serrato?
Yes.
Director Silvera? I'm sorry, Director Silvera?
Aye.
Director Hoag?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Michael. Okay, so now we're on to 11B is a request to approve the Regional Early Action Planning funding, and that's Matt. So. Oh, you're on mute. There's no voice coming out of him.
So we have this issue with Matt's computer periodically. So we're gonna reset him. So give us about 10 seconds and we'll see if we can get it fixed.
Okay.
It's not his fault. This, for some reason, his machine does this quite a bit.
My machine at home does this, and all I have to do is unplug the camera and the mic, count to 10 and plug it back in, and then it works.
Yeah. All right.
How about now?
Yes, yes.
All right, thank
Okay,
you.
I was already getting my staff report thinking, oh man, I covered this one.
So request authorization for me to get a new computer. No, that's a joke. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. So the Regional Early Action Plan funding from the State Housing and Community Development, this was a discussion item last month. And the board members talked about exploring a regional approach to housing and talking to the Technical Review Board jurisdiction management. And we did that, and the Technical Review Board did suggest convening a work group of the jurisdictions to explore a regional approach to housing and what that would look like, and what specific amounts would be appropriate for that approach and what it would be and the scope and all those sorts of things. But we also did talk a little bit about the regional housing needs assessment, and given the schedule, staff feels like we need to get started on that. And so that the technical review board did also recommend, or actually was a consensus, there wasn't an action. Consensus was to get started with the RENA authorization funding for that, and then also convene that work group. So, so basically what we're requesting is authorization for $125,000 of this $900,000 be used for starting the regional housing needs process, and the staff administrative costs for both RENA and the work group and whatever work they do. And then secondly, to convene that work group, which would be technical review board, the city management, county administrative officer, and their staff as appropriate to explore some regional approaches to housing. And I also wanted to point out a couple things about timing. So just a reminder that all of this $900,000 has to be spent within 2 years. And then something that's new is that we have gotten the valley, because this is valley-wide money, that pieces are going to each COG. So HCD did basically say that we need to be reporting what we're doing with the funds. So each county has to, and each jurisdiction that's receiving funds has to report up the chain to HCD. So some of the other jurisdictions are a little farther along because they know what they're going to be doing, and they are spending some of the money. So that's the thing that HCD is, I guess, emphasizing. And we have 300,000 now, but they're not going to give us the rest of the money until some of the $300,000 gets spent. So just to, toss that out there, because that's new. And again, the requested action is to authorize $125,000 and convene a work group to explore uses of the funds and bring that back to the board. And I'd be happy to take questions or your discussion.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? Okay, Director Silvera.
No, just more comments, Matt. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, I had to switch microphones. I was having some issues. No, I think that I like the regional approach. I know that it's probably adding a little bit more to the pile. But I think that when you look at, if you disperse those dollars out by jurisdictions, some of the smaller jurisdictions are just going to, it's really not enough to do anything. And so I appreciate the approach that we're taking. I know that TRB concurred with it. And so I'm in supportive of kind of looking at a regional approach and trying to make those dollars on that scale of economy work the best, for the whole group, versus I know some of the smaller cities, it's just going to really, it's some money available to them, but it's just not enough for them really to do anything.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions for the board? Are there any questions from the public?
I do not see any hands raised.
All righty, with that then, is there a motion to approve $125,000 to the regional housing project?
McDaniel will move.
Is there a second?
Silvera.
Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Silvera.
Go ahead, Tom.
All right. Ferrier will second.
All right. Joy, can you call for the vote?
Director Kale?
Yes.
Director Espinoza?
Yes.
Director Faria?
Yes.
Director McDaniel?
Aye.
Director Nagy?
Aye.
Director Pereira,
I vote yes.
Director Pedroso,
Aye.
Director Serrato,
Yes.
Director Silvera,
I vote aye.
Director Hoag.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, so we're moving to item 12 is for discussion, which will be presented by staff one at a time to allow board members to ask questions and provide staff direction. So item 12A is a presentation presentation of the draft 2021-22 overall work program and budget. And I'll turn it over to Stacy, which there you have it. You're on
Thank
mute.
you.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I have 3 screens and I forget sometimes where my cursor is and I can't find my unmute button. Thank you for the opportunity to kind of tee this up. Today is the first in a series of budget presentations that we're going to be doing between now and the end of the fiscal year. As you know, MCAG administers several individual JPAs. So we have several budgets that we prepare individually on an annual basis. So as you can imagine, we're getting late in the hour at this point. If we did all of our draft budgets at the same meeting, it would be quite long. So last year we started presenting the draft budgets in sequential, in an order, 1 month at a time. So today's draft budget is the transportation planning budget only. And then next month will be the draft transit budget. And then in May, we'll have a presentation on the draft RWA budget. So this approach is really intended to try to make the budget process less time intensive at any one given meeting, but also to give the board time to review and discuss each budget as appropriate, as opposed to just drinking from a fire hose and getting all of the budgets at once. So with that said, I'll tee up this presentation and then I'll hand it over to Matt and Nav, because there are just some overarching staffing components that are going to be true across all budgets that I'll address now. So Nav, if I could get the next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of our entire umbrella agency. You should have seen this before. It's in our orientation materials. It's something that I like to use as part of the budget process to demonstrate on a staffing level how all 69 MCAG employees are allocated across the 4 agencies. And also just a real quick summary of what those annual budgets look like and what those priority functions or roles are. In total, we have 69 employees, as I mentioned. So 14 of those work across all of the agencies, and that's the dark blue bar that you see that says administration. So that includes my position, the accounting team, human resources, public affairs, and procurement. So these positions are shared across all of the agencies, which means a portion of the staff costs are paid for by each of the agencies, including the transportation planning department. And then in addition to those positions, there are 6 full-time positions within the transportation department itself. And in total, we have an annual budget of about 3.4 million for the transportation planning function. So if you're familiar with other COGs in the Valley, or you do some of our Valley work, this column of our work program, or this part of our department, is really the most like StanCog or Fresno Cog or Madera CTC or Tulare. All of the other stuff is what makes us unique. So this is that traditional transportation planning role. Okay, if you'll go to the next slide, please, Nav. So I just wanted to set this framework first. This is our entire staff organization, org chart. If you'll click one more time, what the department I'm talking about today for the budget we'll review is for these positions that Matt Fell leads in the transportation planning department. And then if you'll go one more time, Nav, it also includes the partial time of these. And these are those support staff roles that I was talking about, from me to Alicia in procurement, Mary Michael in public affairs, and Christina in HR. and their teams. There's partial time that we allocate to the transportation planning function. So today's budget will look at all of those staffing costs. I did, though, before I hand it over to Matt, I do want to just mention a couple things that will be true across all of our budgets. So, well, first I'll say for the transportation planning department, we're not including any new positions in the coming year budget. So we're not adding staff positions to the budget. We do have a vacancy that we're going to carry and hopefully fill. It's very difficult to recruit in transportation planning. But true across all of our agency budgets that we'll talk about over the next couple of months, this budget does include scheduled merit increases. So those would only be for those eligible for merit increases that have growth in their range, and they're only, based on performance, of course, but it doesn't include a COLA. So there had been several years when I joined the agency, we had several years of COLAs that were administered. But last year was, I think, one of the first years that we didn't include a COLA, and I'm not including a COLA in this year's budget. And that determination was based on, an analysis of inflation region. So we looked at the San Francisco, Oakland region CPI and the Western region CPI, and determined that MCAG's COLAs that had happened over the last couple of years had outpaced inflation. We're getting right there. We're getting pretty close. So we'll look at this again next year. But for this budget and all subsequent budgets, there is no COLA assumed in any of it moving forward. So unless there are questions for me about anything I just mentioned, Nav, if you'll click through, I believe the next slide, I'll hand it over to Matt, unless there are any questions for me before we talk about the work program itself. And I don't see any. Okay, Matt, you're up.
Okay, thank you. So this is talking about some of the completed tasks from the fiscal year that we're in right now. So we did finish up the unmet transit needs process, and you approved that report and finding. And also same thing with the Federal Transportation Improvement Program. You just approved that. We submitted that, and that should be approved by the federal government coming up pretty soon here. Air quality conformity was along with that. And of course, the Measure B implementation plan amendment last fall. And then we have 2 transit studies that are underway right now. The West Side Commuter Study, which will be coming to you for acceptance next month, I believe. And then the YART strategic plan, which is underway. So that's the tasks, major tasks that we've finished or finishing this fiscal year. And then ongoing work for the next year. So we have mandated programs. So administering the CMAQ, the RSTP, the LTF, all those funding programs, all those great acronyms. And then planning activities, including the ones I mentioned, plus the traffic modeling, the geographic information systems, citizen participation, regional coordination, and regional transportation planning. Next slide. So just a few of the major projects for next fiscal year. So FTIP is always a major project, even in years where we don't do a new FTIP, there's amendments, and really the bulk of the work is in those amendments. So any federally funded transportation project has to be in the FTIP. There's a lot of work that's in there, including the CMAQ and so forth. Under traffic modeling, we are proposing a vehicle miles traveled study and to help the jurisdictions with the SB 743 stuff. So this is a requirement that the state instituted where there has to be an analysis of the vehicle mile travel impacts for certain kinds of projects, development projects, transportation projects. And so we are going to do some sort of a study to assist with the things that the jurisdictions have to do. There was interest in doing a pavement software upgrade. So the roads were scanned a few years back and some software was purchased, and we have heard that there's interest in a different software platform. So we're going to explore that a little more, and we're putting some money in the budget in case that is pursued. Because it is an eligible expense for the planning money, and it's a good expense of the planning money. Those pavement management systems really help your jurisdictions decide how to spend your limited maintenance dollars. planning studies, the short range transit plan, and then a electric vehicle charging station study, which may also take on some other EV and zero emission type stuff because it can be pretty broad. So we'll have a narrow down that scope and talk about that more later. And then of course, Measure V administration. So the implementation plan update, which is a different item on the agenda. And of course, every year the Measure V has to do an audit and annual report. And then the big one is the regional transportation plan. So every 4 years, we have a large effort there that we have to do the regional transportation plan. It was last updated in 2018. It's due in 2022. There's a lot of work that goes into that. So that's really the biggest item, the biggest single item in next year's budget. And then, is this one me now? Yeah, it's federal funding. So the bulk of our planning revenue comes from the federal government, the Metropolitan Planning, PL funds, we call it. And FTA has a little bit, and together those are the consolidated planning grant. Caltrans administers that for the federal government, and they are the ones who review our draft. We sent them our draft work program, and they'll send us their comments, and then we'll address those comments and bring the final back to you. And that's in the overall work program, which is that document that Caltrans and then FHWA approved. Now I think it's your turn now.
Thank you, Matt. Anybody have a question for Matt?
I just had a comment, if I could.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I want to thank you for the West Side commuter study, because it's very, very well done, and I think it shows a very large and very real need, and I appreciate MCAG undertaking that for us. It really is going to be a big benefit to our citizens.
Thank you, and we'll talk about that more. It looks like next month we'll be bringing that back to the board.
Wonderful, thank you.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to be going over the revenues and expenditures for the transportation department. The FHWA is basically a federal highway funds that is used for planning purposes. FTA is the federal transit funds. These two funds are on reimbursement basis. So if we don't have expenditures to apply to these fundings, we don't get that funding. SB1, we will not be going after those funds, the grant this year. Measure V, as everybody knows, it's on a sales tax basis, so that funding will just trickle in. TDA, those are LTF. It's on a apportionment allocation, so we'll get those funding. And then the non-transportation indirect cost, as Stacy mentioned, we have 14 staff that provide staff across all agencies. There's some costs that cannot be reimbursed by Caltrans or any other forms of methods. So what happens is that gets into indirect cost, and the indirect cost gets spread across everybody, all agencies under the MCAG umbrella, including the transportation department. So that indirect cost is around $1 million that we have to spread across. So that is the revenue, because that's what we're going to charge other agencies to recover our indirect costs that we can't bill out. Our expenditures, our revenue expenditures increased by $22,000, but the biggest increase was our fringe. What's in the fringe is what's in the fringe benefit is health benefits, merit increase, not merit increase, but health benefits, retirement allocation, sorry, and then any other thing that we contribute to, like workers' comp and all that. And it increased by $145,000. That's because of our contribution to retirement, and there's like a 3.5% increase in our benefits, and we're also on an age-based benefit. So the older we get, the little more expensive it gets. But if you look at it, we do have some offsetting expenditures, like professional services dropped by $86,000, along with legal services. We did increase our auditing services. We're going to be looking at doing a TDA audit of our TDA, all of our TDA funds. But overall, our revenues and expenditures increased by $22,000. So does anybody have any questions?
I
Seeing
have
none?
one, Matt, but you answered it, so thank you. I was curious as to why the big jump in the fringe benefits, but thank you for answering.
Okay, so then we're moving on to item, was that, are we done or are we moving on?
That was a presentation of the draft. So if there aren't any other questions, we can move on to the next item.
Next item of
B.
13. Are we on to 13 now? Okay.
No, we're on 12B.
Oh, okay, 12B. I was just thinking that we were all done through there. That would be Matt.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is a discussion information item, Measure B implementation plan, development and policies. And so not an action item, but if there's any direction, questions or so forth, of course, that's we can take that. So just the schedule basically that we're looking at is having a Measure B implementation plan update by this fall. And so we're starting now with some of the policy discussion, which I'm going to talk about a little bit. I think I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so I can walk through it just to hit some highlights. Okay, so there's the staff report. So I'm just going to highlight a couple key things that I wanted to call your attention to. Implementation plans updated every 2 years. It was updated in 2019 and amended last year. And so another update is due this calendar year. And in the development of both of the previous instances, there was discussion about some potential policies. And so much of this is following from what that discussion was from those regional project committees. That's where the bulk of the discussion occurred. So we are bringing this forward for discussion. And the schedule that we outlined was that this would be for discussion this month, and then we would bring that back next month for action, along with a call for regional projects and or amendments to existing projects. And then give 2 months for that call for projects, and then convene those East and West regional project committees. Those are the bodies that recommend projects to the governing board. And so that process would carry forward into the fall and have an updated plan this fall. So the policies I wanted to call attention to were, one is regional project criteria. So that's something that was talked about a little bit in the previous plans, and staff is suggesting that a regional project should be functionally classified as above minor collector, just to make sure that a local road isn't a regional project. And then also I wanted to highlight here that regional projects have to be listed in the RTP. I'm going to jump forward a bit because I excerpted the expenditure plan itself. So regional projects must be listed in the RTP. So all of the project proposals in the first implementation plans, those were projects that were in the RTP, and that's going to be an important thing in this call for projects as well. So I just wanted to highlight that, that's a foundational requirement. So back up to that's that. Then there's some stuff on how the meetings occur and implementation updates. We're suggesting a mid-cycle progress report. So every even number year report on the balances and expenditures and what, the progress that the projects are making. We have our annual report, but a mid-cycle for just specifically looking at the implementation plan projects. And I wanted to point out, we have inserted language here about administrative amendments, and we're seeking board feedback on if this is something that you would be interested in delegating to the director or not. So it's a choice that a board in a similar position sometimes delegates discretion for making cost changes, small or percentage-wise cost changes, or total cost too, which is, we put this in terms of percent, but it could also be, a maximum. And then if a project needed to make a cost change, that could be at the director's discretion, or we could bring it to you. So the executive director would not have to automatically approve, a request. It could come to the full board, but right now, any such request has to come to the full board, no matter how small it is. We have some in here about leveraging incentive. It was something that has been talked about. So the idea here is if somebody has a project that's funded with Measure V and then they go out and they get state or federal funding that's decided by, outside entities, outside Merced County. And then the funding that they get, they could then use that difference and apply it to another regional project in their jurisdiction. So it would be an incentive for jurisdictions to get outside funding, which, as you know, Measure V, part of the goal is to leverage other outside sources of funding. So that might be a way to increase that. We have something in here that I'm going to call sequential programming, which is that the construction costs for a project, especially a larger project, are often not really fully understood until the environmental is done. And so this is a policy that is common at, for example, California Transportation Commission, where you have to complete your environmental before you can get the full construction funding. And so this would give a better idea of what those costs for right-of-way and construction are for projects. Is that the programming wouldn't be until after the environmental was completed. And then lastly, we had potentially a reserve fund for a contingency, kind of a rainy day fund type idea, and a project development reserve for doing the initial work on a project. So similar to what I was just mentioning about trying to identify what the costs and scope of a project are. Sometimes it can be hard to get the money to do those initial studies. So it may be beneficial to have a chunk of Measure V that's devoted to those initial studies for projects, for project development. So these are ideas, and we'd be interested in any of your feedback or discussion. And of course, you can provide that later. We are planning on bringing this back to you next month, and we have received a little bit of feedback so far on some of the items. And so if you have any questions or discussion, I'd be happy to entertain that now.
Director Silvera has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Matt, if you can go back up to page 337, the administrative amendments.
Yeah.
The change in cost up to 20% of the total project cost if the project cost does not exceed exceed $1 million. I can live with that one. I don't know that I can live with the 15% of the total project costs, which, on projects that exceed $1 million, because, if you're talking about a $2 million project, it's probably in the wheelhouse. But if you're talking about a $15 million project, that's a lot more money. That's not a decision that I would be comfortable letting someone else make when ultimately we're on the hook for it. I just, that one right there, I don't know that if you could word it a different way, that it's just basically it exceeds $1 million. That's from 1,000,001 to infinity, right? That's so that one there kind of doesn't necessarily sit with me too well.
Okay. Another way of doing it is 20% up, or 20% up to $1 million, for example, or, have a hard cap. There could be a hard cap of like whatever amount, 200,000, 300,000, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
And that would address that. And that's not uncommon for there to be an upper limit of some sort.
I would be a lot more comfortable seeing an upper limit there.
Okay.
Okay. And then the other thing that I was kind of thinking, I know in sitting on both the east and the west side regional projects committees, like you've captured a lot of the things that having the benefit of sitting on both that were brought up is kind of like, what is our policies? We need some policies in place that kind of guides us. And so I think you've captured most of that. There's something else that I was thinking about, and I thought, I'm sorry I didn't mention it to you yesterday when I chatted with you. but I thought about it is some of these, they're regional projects, but they're smaller projects. And so I'm going to use my friends in Dos Palace and Livingston and Gustine, for example. It's a regional project, but they're going to be the one that's kind of spearheading it. Is there a way, these deals are done on, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're done on a reimbursement basis. So
Right.
you would spend the money and then you'd submit it, and we're pretty good about, you get all the right stuff in and we get you your money back. Is and I don't know if you set a dollar amount in there, but for some of these smaller regional projects that a city like like Dos Palace and for that sake, even like the city of Los Banos and Atwater, they might not have that extra kind of cash sitting within their road funds or wherever they're getting the funds from to do it. So is there a way that if the project is, it's done its environmental, it's done all those things, that instead of it being on a reimbursement basis, it's done on a, like, I'm not going to say where you're kind of like, okay, we know that it's going to cost, I'm not saying you give them the whole amount, but you front load some of that money in order, because what worries me is, let's just make up, say it's a $2 million project for a city like Dos Palace. If they were doing a $2 million project, they would have to save for probably 5 years to get the $2 million to do the project. And that would keep them on the list. That would, and they're taking up a spot. So I don't know if we could come up, if you guys could come up with something, some kind of language, it meets all the certain criteria. That are we able to front load some of that money to these smaller jurisdictions? Like as the county, for example, I mean, there's never enough money to do anything, but if they're going to, we have a lot bigger road network to worry about. We have more money. It's easier to kind of, for lack of better words, rob Peter to pay Paul. For some of these smaller jurisdictions, they don't have that. So I was just curious, and I'd love to hear from my colleagues what their thoughts are on something like that.
Okay, I like that idea. Director Faria, you have a question?
Got to get my mute button. Yeah, on the amendments, executive director's discretion, maybe we could set up a graded level, 15%, 1 million to 2 or 3 million, or up to 5, something like that. So it would be, and then once you get up to, I don't know, 10 million or 15 million, and of course you would, then I think anything over 1% would probably come out more. But I'm thinking if you set up some kind of a graded deal on that. And then I really like the idea that Scott just brought up of being able to give cities a little bit out front, particularly the smaller cities, because I know you guys don't have a lot of revenue. We don't have a lot of revenue, but I know you have even less. So I would support that if we could come up with something like that too. Thanks.
Thank you. Director McDaniel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'd like to touch on what Director Silvera had said as well. The reimbursement part is what I'm looking at as well. So what benefit is it to MCAG if we have the money, whether you have it in your coffers or whether the entity has it in their coffers, because they're not going to request the money unless they are ready for the project. So I'm just wanting to understand why we can't direct fund it right from the beginning. Because I know as a county, when we have multiple projects going on at the same time, it drives our revenues or our monies very tight at times. Like, so for instance, we're doing the Campus Expressway. Campus Expressway, they fronted us the $5 million, but we had to pay for the rest of it, and it be reimbursed from the state as we go. And when that happens, it drives a lot of our other opportunities low, and we can't act on them because we're waiting to get funded back. So I'm just wondering what benefit is it MCAG to hold that money and reimburse as it goes?
Okay, I think we can look at those things and come back with something on that. I don't know if Stacy wanted to offer anything. I think it's kind of a default position that measure agencies have because the projects are being implemented by different agencies, so it's kind of a risk management thing. But maybe there's a way we can change the funding agreement so that there's advances made on a periodic basis or something to keep the cash flow going as has been talked about. So I think we can explore that and see if
Yeah, I'm not asking to fund the whole project completely at one time, but yeah, as we go.
yeah, to build up a buffer from which funding can be expended without having
Right.
to drain something else.
Especially for our smaller agencies.
Sure.
That's very difficult. I mean, even for the county, but for the county, we have multiple projects going on at the same time, and we do run into those problems. So I'd like to look at that a little more aggressively. And I can say that I've working with our Department of Public Works, they have requested that. So Dana has requested that to help us out on our revenue streams.
Yeah, and the only, I would say the only other thing that when this was initially discussed, because it's really not about a benefit to MCAG, it was about, being, trying to have, use best practices that make, the oversight of the funds and making sure the funds are expended on eligible, purposes and all of that kind of stuff. It's a mechanism in that vein, but also trying to be sensitive to that exact issue was why in our agreements, the turnaround time for us to issue a check to reimburse the jurisdiction for a project is very short, and I can't remember what it is.
Basically, what we do is usually whenever we get a reimbursement, our goal is to turn around within 5 days to send a check out to the jurisdiction within less than 5 days.
Right. So that was one of the other mechanisms that was, because this was an early conversation that has come up, and then we hadn't really heard much from the jurisdictions that it had become a problem. But I think there is something that we can explore around, in advance at the onset, so that the money the jurisdiction is spending from the start is measure money. And then it'll give that front so that as then those costs start to be incurred, they have that essentially seed money to start the project. And then it'll only just be that measure money that's moving through the project. So we'll put Matt and Nav and I will put our heads together, and we can definitely look at that.
I have full confidence in Nav being the watchdog over that. So.
All right, Director Kale.
We have other self-help counties that may have already existing practice in this regard. So if that's true, we can borrow from, somebody who's already figured it out.
I don't want to be a follower. Let's be a leader.
Okay.
Okay, Director Kale and then Director Silvera.
Yeah, I have a tendency to agree with that, being one of those smaller entities. And I agree with Director Silvera that I wasn't real pleased with the 15% of the total cost of projects of those 1 million too. So I agree with those.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Director Silvera.
Yeah, and thank you for my colleagues sharing their thoughts. It's really to me, it's back to getting stuff done and I take your point, Chair or Darren. The part of like with the county, we have a different issue. We have multiple projects going on all around everywhere. And again, a scenario where, obviously, we don't know what projects cost really until they're finally to the end, because you have all the best estimates in the world and there could be, but I'm not sitting here saying, hey, if it's a $5 million project, you write them a check for $5 million and they go do their project, something that where they're eligible to get a portion of it. And especially for those smaller districts, they would have to save for years to be able to get enough to even start the project. And that's, for me, it's really when we talk about Measure V and letting the voters know what we're doing with their money, the more projects, the quicker that we can get them out and get them done. That allows, when people ask us, well, what are you doing? Why did we pass the sales tax measure? What's going on with it? I think this all figures into it. And I just really great discussion by everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Severo, I do have one comment to make. They don't bill at the end of the project. They could bill whenever they can bill weekly, monthly, however they like. And that's, when I get a call, I go, whenever you guys need it, we'll cut you a check right away within 5 days. The county used to cut it at the end of the project. I spoke to you guys at Public Works, and I think they're doing it like depending on when they need it, right? So if it's a monthly basis or biennial, whatever it is, that's when we cut the check.
Yeah, and to that now, I don't think that anybody's is not questioning how good of a job you are getting them paid. I think it's just, for me, it goes back to, let's just make sure that somebody's not having to wait on a project that otherwise could be done with money that's sitting there. So they're going to wait until the next fiscal year because they got to wait to get a little bit more to get it going. If we can speed that up and that project get like just think about that crazy thing in government, actually try to deliver something early, instead of usually late. Like that's kind of where the thought process comes from. But you guys, I think what you're doing on your end, I've not heard any complaints anywhere that once they do submit something to you, you guys are rock stars on getting it turned around. I think and listen, when this was set up, none of us had this kind of options before. Then I'm glad that we're putting some policies and some procedures in place so that it's in, because at some point, everybody that you're looking at as elected officials won't be here, but chances are Measure V will still be here. And we've set policies in place to really do good work with the people's money.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I just have one question to make sure that I'm clear. We're talking about policies here for regional projects. I just want to make sure we're talking about advancing for regional projects and not local money.
No, because local money, they get their money, right? They get their piece of money, they spend it how they want. No, this is, I didn't specifically say, but we were talking about the regional project stuff. So this is policy for the regional projects, yes.
Perfect, just want to make sure. I thought so, but it's one of those assumptions I didn't want to make.
Okay, so are we on 12C or did we finish 12C and now we're on 12D? I'm so confused. You guys are talking too much.
we are now
12C.
on 12C.
Yes.
12C. Let's go to 12C. It's transportation planning and Measure V update. I swore we just did that.
We'll be quick.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. A few things. One is the Measure V annual report will be released very soon. April 1st is our target date. So that will be out. That's our third annual report. And the Valley Voice Sacramento virtual trip was earlier this month. Supervisor McDaniel participated in that. And that's the one where the San Joaquin Valley advocates at Sacramento for issues common across the valley, and including finishing the existing system and pragmatic solutions to air quality and transit funding reform and passenger rail. So some of the usual things that we talk about. And I think it was a successful trip. The representatives spoke to our legislators. A heads up for a couple items, agenda items next month, including the West Side Commuter Study, the a congestion mitigation air quality policy update and call for projects. This Measure V implementation policy item and call for projects potentially. So potentially 2 call for projects would be issued at your discretion next month. And then the federal government at the end of last year passed COVID stimulus bill, which was included about $900 million that's coming to California for transportation. And the California Transportation Commission is going to be deciding that next week on the 24th, how to split that up. And so we anticipate receiving some of that, and we'll tell you about that next month. And next Thursday, the high-speed rail business plan is up for consideration by that board. And that's the one that identifies Merced, Fresno, Bakersfield, initial operating segment. So we did submit a letter of support that was on this agenda. So that's a pretty big deal. Hopefully they pass that. And then lastly, we have been hearing some buzz about earmarks being brought back, and some of you may have heard the same thing, and I'm going to pass it over to Stacy for the latest on that.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Just quickly, there was some discussion at the TRB meeting, as all of the talk around earmarks returning was a buzz. And the discussion at the TRB was whether or not there should be a regional prioritization or a regional strategy around earmark submissions through our congressman's office. So I had indicated that Matt and I would talk to our federal lobbyists, which is Townsend Public Affairs, and Mary Michael as well, about kind of, what is it looking like? What types of projects are going to be eligible? What type of money are we talking about? To really just have more information, and also the when question. So we talked to, gosh, I can't remember if it was this week or last week, but we talked to Townsend since the TRB meeting last week. And before we could even act on, the potential of having the discussion about whether or not we'd want to prioritize or have a regional strategy to earmarks, we learned yesterday that the House reversed the ban on earmarks, and now earmark requests to the congressman's office are due a week from tomorrow. So that has effectively removed out any potential for us to have a regional prioritization process or strategy discussion or anything, and turn those around. So unless the board directs me otherwise, today, the agency's approach to earmark requests, because MCAG won't be submitting any, but we would support and provide a letter of support to any transportation project earmark request that would come from a member agency or a partner agency that's consistent with our overall work plan and transportation priorities. Because we have a week to work on those. I will mention, while not for this board or MCAG specifically, on the YART side of the equation, we are looking into the existing opportunities to pursue an earmark for YART's capital. We have not determined if we'd be eligible yet, but we're working through that. But just for the sake of transparency, that is something that we would be working on through YARTs. But for MCAG, we'd be pleased to support any projects that are put forward by our jurisdictions.
Okay, are there any other questions? No? Okay, then we're going to move to item 12D, is the Caltrans report. And you want to go ahead, Stacy?
I believe Marlon Regisford is on, I see, from District 10.
Oh, there he is.
Oh.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll be brief, hopefully. Just want to say thank you to the board. Thank you to Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Guzman. I just want to give a couple of items for today. And first of all, I want to start off with some happy news. And thank you, Stacy, for the note earlier. I'm very happy to announce that City of Gustine has received their E76 authorization for construction. And so we're gonna be able to get this roundabout hopefully constructed very shortly. So that's very great news. It took a lot of hard work from our team, from MCAG team, and also the city as well. So, and special shout out to Doug Dunford of the city. So really appreciate all the hard work and looking forward to that construction. So with that, I also did want to mention Dennis gives his regards. He's on vacation this week. Well needed. So he'll be back next time, but he gives his regards. Couple things I did want to mention for today. So we want to make sure folks are aware of that. We also do have a video explaining that a little bit more on our Caltrans website as well. So just want to mention those things. And I did hear there was a lot of discussion today regarding litter and cleanup. And I'm happy that we're working with City of Merced as well on that. Thank you, Mayor Serrato and your team. Hopefully we can get a maintenance delegation agreement finalized pretty shortly, and all the locations identified that you'd like to see us help out with in terms of cleanup. Statewide, there is I'm hearing that there is going to be perhaps a emergency service contract for litter, because it's really becoming a statewide issue. There is a lot of PPE that's being disposed of statewide and into our drainage facilities, and is really causing a headache to our maintenance team. But there's going to be a contract likely to be let out for about $4 million. And I think District 10 will be part of that contract. So we're looking to hear a little bit more about that moving forward. Hopefully get some help on that. Last two things I will mention is just some major construction that is going on in Merced County. one of them being on State Route 165. This is a closure that we'll be having for construction operations, and it'll be a partial closure, but it'll be starting on March 21st. So that's Sunday, and it'll go through next Friday, the 26th, from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. So it'll be nighttime closure, partial closure, and it's part of the Route 165 curb ramp improvement project. So just FYI on that one. And the other one I did want to mention is on Route 99, and that's from 16th Street in Merced to West Side Boulevard. And part of that includes a daytime closure, which you all should be aware of. And that's going to be on the on-ramp, full on-ramp closure from 16th Street to southbound Route 99 for utility work. That's going to be next Tuesday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So if you're out and about on Tuesday morning, just be aware there is going to be some work going on. Most of the work will be going on at night though, next week. So you'll see some ramp closures from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Hopefully that has minimized impact on our traffic operations. So those are the major things that I wanted to mention today. If there's any questions, concerns, thoughts from the board, I'd be happy to hear it. Thank you.
Okay, well, Director Espinosa has one, and then Silvera, and then McDaniel.
All right.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask Caltrans regarding the, I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Marlon Regis Ford.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Highway 140 in Planada, we got the four-way stop sign there, thanks to Caltrans. But on that other crossing there, pedestrian crossing, do you know when, if we can get that Jayhawk system there from Carnitas del Sol across the street to Sutter?
Yes, by the Carnitas, yes, of course. We did send a letter out to MCAG, but I do want to update you on that. We are expecting to begin our environmental phase in April of this year, and we are studying several alternatives for that intersection. So that is in the works. This project is moving. We are still planning to have construction begin on March 2025. So we're still a little bit ways out. We're still got the environmental phase to go, but it's moving forward.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it, because you know what, we're in spring and summer will be here. And so with hopefully with all the people getting the vaccines, we'll be getting more traffic into Yosemite National Park. So that's one of the main routes into Yosemite National Park. So I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Hey, Director Silvera.
Marlon, thank you. And specifically, I think that work that they're doing on 165, that's in Las Banas area.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've been working on it for a little while there. So it's coming along nicely. Just want to make comment. You brought up about the cacti.
Yeah.
It's something that I know at Valley Voice, we have some real concerns with it, because there's this push to get away from, projects that are going to expand lanes, expansion projects. That's my words. That's not the technical word. And Caltrans has made billions of dollars investments in Highway 99 and widen it to 3 lanes. And we're really scared that with this climate action plan coming out, that they're basically going to throw away that investment. And really, in my opinion, they picked the low hanging fruit first. It was easier to expand in the wide open spaces. And what's going to be left is that pinch point coming through Merced, and where we all can say that that's going to be the costliest piece, with the elevated section of 99 that runs through Merced. So I don't know what you can do, but I just want you to pass on our concerns. I know that on Valley Voice, we pass that along to all of our Valley legislators, that we don't want to be overlooked. Basically the simplest way to say it is that climate action plan puts the Valley at a disadvantage again. And we know with the state how much we love to talk about equity and not, the folks that are affected the most, the disproportionately, the most vulnerable among us. We have a lot of those folks here in Merced County, and we do really feel, and I know I'm not just speaking for myself, that this climate action plan really benefits a lot of the larger metropolitan areas and leaves us in the dust again. And so I hope at any chance that you can get that you could help advocate for us, because and listen, if we just want to make it about dollars and cents, the state has invested a lot of money into 99. Let's finish that investment and not just throw it away. So thank you.
Thank you, Director. And let me note that we are well in understanding of what the implications are for CAPDI and what it means for 99 and the Valley as a whole. And we've been trying to kind of figure that out internally ourselves. And as we've mentioned in previous board meetings, we are planning to have a 99 summit that will acknowledge what the previous work has been done with the business plan and plan for what we can do moving forward to finish the 99, right? That's been a big topic, and it's been noted at Caltrans up and down the valley. And Stacy has been a big help in letting our headquarters staff know as well what the situation is. So we really appreciate all the feedback. We do share those concerns in District 10, and we're going to work hard to see what we can do to make sure that we can commit to some of the things that we promised to do and some of the things that we've had in mind for a long time now. But it does create a curveball for us, and we got to see how we can best plan for the future for what our needs are. So Director, your comments are well heard, and we're going to work on this and hopefully get some good results and coordinate with CalSTA as well, since they're the proprietors of this document. But it's a big deal. So more to come on that, and we appreciate your thoughts.
Well, then just lastly, when you have that 99 summit, I would encourage you, for your invitees, to the Valley legislators already know about it. They travel up and down 99. Is try to find, and this is going to probably be hard to do, but some logical, reasonable people in the legislature that are from the Bay Area and Southern California, and invite them to that summit so that they can see firsthand what decisions that are being made by Sacramento and how they affect our folks here in the Valley.
Just so I'm clear, you would like to see representatives from outside of the Valley at the summit?
Absolutely, because these folks, if they don't travel down the 99, they don't understand our pain. And so if you had legislators from outside the Valley, legislators from other areas, sympathetic ones, and you invited them and they got to see firsthand. And the thing is, if you invite them, the chances are they're probably going to drive down 99 from Sacramento. So they get to, not only do you get to hear our concerns, but they actually get to feel them for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll definitely make that a consideration for sure. That's an interesting perspective. I appreciate that.
All right, Darren. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Marlon, for the update. And I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you that there are 30 million metric tons of food product that travel up and down 99 and actually feed the Bay Area and the LA area from our fields here. And so I just have to add that on. So anyway, I want to say that I have, I'm looking at our Director Espinoza to treat you and I both to some of the carnitas out there in his area. So we'll leave it at that. But second of all, I have witnessed the stoplights with the reflectors, and I can actually say my wife and I were traveling through, and it brought it to her attention how well you can see that addition that you guys are doing statewide, and I think it's very good. And speaking of those stoplights that we've seen, I just want to know what the progress was on that. I can say that since my last call, I haven't been caught. But, we were saying every time a train comes, we get backed up almost a mile worth of cars in that commute from Atwater into Merced when that stoplight misses its trigger. So I was wondering, have you guys looked at that or worked on it, or is there an update?
So we've initiated the investigation. These things do take a bit of time. So our traffic operations, I assume that they'll have to go out in the field and do some observations, but typically a traffic operations investigation can take some months. So, and it all depends, especially if traffic is at its normal level. Right now, we know it's not quite, but yeah, we know that the investigation has been initiated. I don't currently have a time for completion yet, but we are taking a look at it for sure.
Much appreciated. Thank you. Just because I'm a victim of that light. So as a
I'm
lot of
ready
other
for carnitas.
folks. Thank you.
Hey, Darren, I'm ready for carnitas anytime. We'll invite Marlon as well.
Ready? Awesome.
Can I come?
Yeah, all the directors can come and staff too.
Okay, are there any other questions for Caltrans? Seeing none? Thank you very much. That was informational only. Thank you, Marlon. Okay, moving on to the item number 13, and there is none, so we're going to move on to item number 14. Consent, oops. Did I skip that one? Consent calendar. Also without items on this, so we don't have anything on that one. So we're moving on to item number 15. Okay, we're moving right along now. Item number 15 is an action item, but there is none. So we're moving on to 16. Woo! Okay, item number 16 is the Transit Monthly Update, and that's with Christine. And thank you very much, Christine, for being here with your bus update.
Thank you, Madam Chair and directors. Good afternoon. Can you guys see my screen? PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't see the red line around it, so I couldn't tell if it was presenting. Good afternoon. I'm glad that we've saved the best for last. So I'm going to go through this and get you guys out of here as quickly as possible. I don't have an update on the ridership. We're still working through validating some of the numbers, so I don't have any additional information to share with you on that. I did want to highlight that today is Driver Appreciation Day. And so we've given them a few t-shirts today and just a few goodies, and just kind of told them how much we appreciate them and thank them for all their hard work over the past year. It hasn't been an easy year for them. I wanted to update you guys that we've created a Mask Up Central Valley campaign for our transit drivers. And we've partnered with some of our local transit agencies. And in Stacy's next update, she will include a link to the video, and you can see it on YouTube. We do plan to promote it on various social medias and any sort of local media that will pick it up. It's a really neat video of why various operators are masking up. So kudos to the PIO team for putting that together. As far as the operations and maintenance update, we've resumed full service as of February 8th. And as of March 15th, we've started collecting fares. We are offering free rides to passengers going to their vaccination appointments. We are selling tickets at the Transpo, which we haven't done in a few years, and we are accepting cards only. And the picture over on the right, we had a training with the local or the county fire department on disabling a bus and putting out any sort of emergencies on buses. And so that was a great experience for the local staff and the emergency personnel. We continue with our COVID-19 precautions, sanitizing our vehicles. All of our driver barriers are up, and providing masks with mask dispensers on board the vehicle at no cost to our passengers. And then I wanted to go through our microtransit pilot program that we're working on implementing starting May 1st. This program is going to be funded by the CARES Act, and the service will be called the microbus. And so I'm excited to get you more information as we near the actual start date. So microtransit, I would consider it a bit of a hybrid of kind of an Uber and public transit system, so like a dial-a-ride. The system is established by having virtual stops, so they're not physical bus stop poles every quarter mile. It's considered an on-demand service, and you can request a ride using your smartphone, going up to the website and typing in your information to make a reservation, or you can call our customer service line, as people do now, to make a reservation. It provides paratransit services from door to door. And we do allow for advanced reservations for our ADA certified passengers. The pilot program will take place in the west side of the county. So Gustine, Santa Nella, Los Banos, Dos Palos communities. This is a major improvement upon some of the services that have been offered, and through the various unmet transit needs and feedback we receive from passengers and operators, this is a much needed improvement to some of the services we offer. The pilot program will begin on Saturday, May 1st. We intend to do various outreach prior to that date, including if so desired, presentations to councils or boards in the areas. We're implementing this pilot project to offer more frequent in-town and inter-town trips between Los Banos and Dos Palos, just kind of looking at travel models. There's a lot of travel between the two, and complementing that with an improvement upon our fixed route services. And this will help address some of the needs in the communities. So our current services are pretty limited as to the frequency and the kind of predictability of the schedule. So it makes it a little difficult for people to understand when the bus is coming, when it's scheduled at 8 and 12:30, 3:30 to 5:20. So we're hoping to clean that up a little with an on-demand service. And then we're looking at improving the Los Banos commuter service. So the on-demand microbus would be feeding directly to our fixed route services, which are a lower cost service per passenger to operate, to hopefully allow people much more freedom in traveling about the county. So how will the microbus complement the fixed route? It will provide more frequent service to and within each of the communities that I've mentioned of Gustine, Santa Nella, and Dos Palos, including Los Banos. And we will not be expanding the level of staffing to provide the services nor the service hours. That may change, obviously, if we have an increase in interest in passengers, and it's just super attractive to people that are not currently riding, which is typically our goal in transit, is to get more people to leave their cars or use transit to get around the communities. So it'll provide a predictable and higher on-time performance for fixed route transit. So that means more frequent buses. So if you miss the bus, your next bus isn't 2.5 hours away, it's maybe an hour away. It will allow all passengers on the west side communities to have a more flexible way to make both in-town trips and intercity trips to get into Merced, Los Banos, or just the greater Merced County. So this is a draft schedule of the timetable for the LB route, which is the commuter route between Los Banos and Merced. And again, this is a pilot. So if the various key performance index, if the key performance measurements are not met, then these are not services that we would move forward with once we fully implement this type of system. And so this is the weekday schedule. The weekend schedule would be a bit more limited than this, but it will be an improvement upon our existing weekend schedule. So just for reference, this is what the fixed route looks like now. It travels along the highway up to Merced and back, and it does so fairly infrequently. So this will help improve some of the frequency of that. The microbus, this is just a pretty generic snapshot of some of the virtual stops and where they'll be located. We're going through and vetting them right now to make sure that they're in safe locations. We will be out on the ground making sure that you know, what we see in Google Maps is what's actually out there. We will do a number of dry runs, and this is all dynamic. So once we get into it, if passengers are struggling to get to a particular location, or operators are in unsafe conditions when they approach any of these stops, we would be able to instantly move it. It would update in the app and on the website and dispatch portals. And none of the stops are expected to be more than a quarter mile from anyone's any given location. So it's pretty equally spread out among the population of each of the communities. So in short, the microbus will help provide more frequent service between communities without increasing our operating costs. It will allow for more dynamic response to demands. So right now when somebody's calling, you know, we're trying to call the driver to figure out where they are, see if they can pick up the passenger, whereas this will be automated and the computer will automatically know where the vehicle is and be able to predict the best pickup time for that passenger trying to schedule at their requested time. All passengers on the West Side communities will have just more flexibility in when they travel and not have to plan their entire day around when they're going to connect with the bus. So we have a number of measurable key performance measures, and we will share some of those with you next month once we have a bit more of the system fleshed out. And customer feedback will be highly regarded and will help us determine some of the success of the pilot program. So we intend to be, in the communities and seeking feedback from our operators and our passengers to make sure that this is working, this is more convenient, and that they are well aware of it in advance of us launching the system. So additional information, it's an 8-month pilot program. As I mentioned, key performance indicators to determine whether it's a success. We have our existing statistics for the services that we're currently providing. So these performance indicators will be significantly higher than that as far as a measurable success. In April, we plan to share more specific details about with this committee, with this board, as far as the passenger interface with the app. So what that looks like and just kind of the ease in scheduling so that if you're ever approached by a constituent, you can share that information. And then just for you guys to understand how simple it is. We'll share information on creating a profile or requesting a trip. We anticipate community outreach to start in April, and it will be English and Spanish focused. And we will start training our first transit contractor staff starting in April so that they're able to communicate that with people trying to call and make reservations on our existing systems. So that concludes my presentation. If anyone has any questions or has any discussion.
Director Faria?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing this service to the West Side. Is there anywhere I can point my constituents to yet for more information on it? I do a weekly update every Friday on the city's website, and so if I can let them know where to start planning and looking, it'll be great.
Absolutely. We have not yet launched our webpage that will be promoting this, but once it is available, we'll make sure that you have a copy of that and can share that with your constituents. That would be excellent.
Great. I like the idea of an app. Really, people live by apps now, and I'm very pleased to see this. And I'll do all I can to promote it so that it will continue and grow. I definitely think there's a need, and I'm pleased to see it happening. So thanks again.
Okay, anyone else that has any comment? With that, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to having our Dos Palace people have more routes to Las Banas too. I know that's been a thing. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, so we're going to move on to the executive director's report, and that would be with Stacy. So Stacy.
I will send an email update if anything just in the sake of time. I don't have anything burning that I need to share today, unless anyone has questions for me.
Okay. Well, then I guess we'll go around. Why don't you raise your hand if you have a report, directors, so that way I can get you at the right time here. Who wants to go first? Anybody have a report? No one has anything to say? What? No director's reports. Stacy, do I have to ask everyone or no? We can move on.
Is Scotty still here? I'm surprised.
Yeah. This is strictly voluntary.
Informational.
It's 6 o'clock. Let's get to closed session.
Okay. Hey, I'm all for that. Okay, so without seeing anyone having a director's report, then we're going to go ahead and move into closed session. Closed session will remain on Zoom for agenda item 19 and item 20, the Zoom meeting will reopen.
Yeah,
so Stacy?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Contrary to what we've done in the past, board members do not need to log out of Zoom. Mary Michael's team will demote everyone so that you don't have to worry about logging back in. So just don't do anything on that, and we'll take care of removing board members from panelists. But there is a phone number that if you need to call into the closed session. If you don't have that, please let me know.
Okay, we're gonna start moving everyone to be attendees only. Is that?
Sorry, 1 second, Mary Michael. Madam Chair, you have
some people, yes,
with their hands up.
Okay, so let's go with Director Faria.
Thank you. I will be recusing myself from the closed session.
Okay.
I already contacted staff to let them know.
Okay, thank you. Director Kale?
I'll be excusing myself from closed session also.
And Director Serrato?
Same.
All right. Well, there you go, Mary Michael.
All right, so no one needs to do anything. We are going to start moving directors. So you'll be in attendee mode, so you won't be able to.
You have to do public comment before we go.
What do we do before we go? Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry. We need to open it up for public comment. Sorry, Mary Michael. Are there anybody out there that wants to have a comment?
I don't see any hands raised at this point.
Okay.
Well, right. So don't leave the meeting. We are going to move you into attendee mode, so we won't be able to see you on camera or to hear you. When you reconvene, we'll shift you back as to panelists so you can turn on your sound and your camera. So just give us a minute to do that.
So do we still have to call the number?
Yes.
Okay. Because other closed sessions, we've done it where they've moved everybody out and just the attendees for closed session were on.
Right. This just helps us from, it just saves you a little time from logging off Zoom and then logging back on.
So we're calling in?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I don't know where to call into, so hang on. I don't have the number. Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
Thank
you.
you. Thanks, Mary Michael.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.